You close your eyes, and for a moment, everything goes quiet. But before the quiet settles completely, let's begin with something you can see. Imagine standing at the edge of a wide, open valley. The sky above you is enormous, pale blue at the top, warm gold near the horizon, where the sun is just beginning to lower itself toward the hills. The land stretches out in every direction, long grasses moving slowly in the wind, dark lines of trees following the curves of a river you can just barely make out in the distance. There are no roads, no buildings, no sounds except the wind and the soft, steady call of birds somewhere behind you. This is the place before the place you know. This is where our story begins. Welcome, by the way. If you're new here, hello. This is a sleep story, and it's also a history. A long, slow, gentle journey through the life of a city. We're going to take our time. There's no rush. By the time we're done, all 40 parts of this, you'll know this place the way you know a very old, very dear friend. If that sounds like something you'd like, go ahead and like this video and subscribe so the next part finds you easily. But for now, just settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest. Let's go back. Long before any city existed here, people lived in this valley. They had been living here for a very long time, thousands of years. In fact, longer than most of us can really hold in our minds. They knew the land the way you know your own home, not just the shape of it, but the feeling of it. The way the air changes before rain, the particular smell of the river in summer, something green and cool and faintly muddy, the way the frost comes first to the low ground near the water, and how the deer know this too and move accordingly. These were people who paid attention, careful, patient attention. You can almost feel it if you try. The ground beneath your feet, not pavement, not gravel, but soft earth, packed down a little along the paths that people walked again and again, season after season. The grass on either side still long and undisturbed. You reach out and let your fingers brush the tops of the seed heads as you walk. They're dry and feathery. They whisper against your palm. The river is closer now. You can hear it, a low, easy sound. Water moving over smooth stones, not rushing, just moving the way it always has. There were camps near rivers like this one, places where families gathered in the warmer months, where fires were lit in the evenings and food was prepared and stories were told. You can almost smell it, wood smoke, faint and sweet, drifting low across the water. The kind of smell that makes something in you relax, even if you can't say why. The people who lived here were not one single group, and their lives were not simple. They had languages and trade and disagreements and celebrations. They had ways of understanding the world that had been tested and refined across countless generations. They knew which plants healed and which ones didn't. They knew the stars well enough to navigate by them. They knew this valley, its moods, its gifts, its dangers, better than anyone who would come after them ever would. And yet, for a long time, the wider world didn't know they were here. That would change. Slowly at first, and then all at once, the way these things tend to go. But that part of the story comes later. For now, just stay here a little longer. The light is fading at the edges of the sky. The gold is deepening toward orange. The birds have gone quieter. Somewhere across the river, something small moves through the undergrowth, a rustle, then stillness. The air is cooling just slightly, the way it does at the end of a long, unhurried day. You are standing at the very beginning of something. You don't know it yet. Neither do the people who live here. They are simply living, cooking, resting, watching the same sky you're watching now. And the valley holds them, the way it has always held them. Quietly, completely, like a breath not yet released. The paddle drips again. You hear it before you see anything. That soft, rhythmic ticking of water falling back into water. Each drop makes a small circle that spreads and fades, spreads and fades. The mist is still here. The river is still wide and grey and breathing. You are somewhere on the water that the Lenape people called Lenape Hituk. The river of the Lenape. The one that Europeans would later call the Delaware. But right now, there are no European names for anything here. There is only the river, and the sound it makes, and the people who have known it for thousands of years. Let yourself settle into the canoe for a moment. Feel the gentle rock of it beneath you. The wood is smooth under your hands, worn by use, shaped by knowledge passed down through generations. The Lenape knew how to read this river, the way you might read a familiar face. Every current, every shallow, every place where the fish gathered in certain seasons. And there were many seasons here. That was the rhythm of Lenape life, not a straight line, but a circle, a turning. In the warmer months, the air smells like green things growing. The riverbanks are soft and full. Families move toward the water, setting up camps where the fishing is good. You can almost hear it. The low voices of people working together, the snap of a fire starting, children somewhere nearby making the sounds children always make. The Lenape fished with nets and weirs, clever structures woven and placed in the water to guide the fish where they were needed. They caught shad and sturgeon, species that ran thick and silver through these waters. If you could taste the air here, it would carry something smoky and rich. Fish curing over a slow fire, food being prepared for the days ahead. When the seasons turned cool, the Lenape moved inland. They followed the deer. They gathered nuts from the forest floor, acorns, walnuts, chestnuts, pressing them into the earth with their feet as they walked. The ground soft and damp beneath them. They lived in longhouses and wigwams, structures built to be warm and practical, covered in bark and woven mats that kept the cold wind out. This was not a simple life. It was a sophisticated one. The Lenape, whose name for themselves meant something close to the people, or the real people, had complex social structures, trade networks, and ways of understanding the world that stretched back far longer than any written record. They were part of the Algonquian-speaking world, connected by language and culture to many other nations across the Northeast. Trade moved along these rivers like water itself. Shells from the coast, copper from far inland, ideas and stories traveling with the people who carried them. The land around what would become Philadelphia was rich. The confluence of the Schuylkill and the Delaware, two rivers meeting, made this a place of abundance. The Lenape understood that. They had villages near these waters. They had names for every hill and bend and inlet. The land was not empty. It was known. It was cared for. There is a Lenape concept that some historians describe as a deep sense of relationship with the natural world. Not ownership exactly, but belonging. The land did not belong to the people. The people belonged to the land. They were part of it. The way the heron standing still in the shallows is part of it. The way the fog rising off the water in the morning is part of it. You sit with that idea for a moment. The canoe drifts slightly. The mist is beginning to thin now, just at the edges, where the sky is growing a pale, soft gold. Somewhere on the bank, a bird calls once and goes quiet. The Lenape world was not frozen or unchanging. No human world ever is. There were conflicts, alliances, movements of people over time. But there was also a deep continuity here, a way of living that had found its shape across centuries, fitted to this particular land, these particular rivers, this particular light falling through these particular trees. And that world was whole, complete in itself. You let the paddle rest across your knees. The water holds you gently. The morning is coming in slowly, the way mornings do when no one is rushing them. You breathe out. The river keeps moving, the way it always has, carrying everything quietly forward. The smell reaches you first. Salt and river mud, carried on a breeze that moves slow and easy across the water. It is a particular kind of smell, ancient, alive, a little sharp at the edges. The kind of smell that tells you a place has been here long before anyone thought to name it. The embers from the night before have cooled now. The council fire is just a dark circle in the earth, quiet as a held secret. And the morning that follows it is soft, pale light spreading across the water. Mist sitting low on the harbor, like a blanket someone forgot to pull away. You are standing at the southern tip of the island. The Lenape people have known this place for generations. They call it Mannahatta, the island of many hills. And it is exactly that, green and rolling, threaded with streams, thick with oak and chestnut. The air tastes faintly of pine when the wind shifts. Then something appears on the water. It moves slowly. A shape that does not belong to this place. A wooden ship, broad and heavy, its sails catching what little morning wind there is. It is called the Half Main, the Half Moon, and the man standing at its bow is Henry Hudson, an English explorer sailing under a Dutch flag, looking for something he will not find here, a passage through to Asia, a shortcut that does not exist. He does not find it, but he finds this. The ship drops anchor. You can hear the chain running out, a low metallic groan that echoes across the still water. Small boats are lowered. Men row toward the shore. Their boots touch the mud at the edge of the island, and they stand there for a moment, looking up at the green hills rising before them. They are not the first people here. They know that. The Lenape watch from the tree line, curious and careful. Trade happens, small exchanges, tentative and polite. Furs for tools, beads for goodwill. The air between the two groups is uncertain, but not yet broken. Hudson sails back to Europe with his reports. The river is deep and wide. The land is rich. The furs are extraordinary, and the Dutch listen. It takes a few years, but by the early 1620s, the Dutch West India Company has decided this place is worth something. Worth a trading post at least. Worth a small settlement at the southern end of that island, where the harbor is wide and the river runs deep enough for ships. They call it New Amsterdam. At first it is almost nothing. A few wooden buildings, a counting house, a windmill turning slowly on the hill, its blades catching the harbor breeze. You can hear it from the water, that soft rhythmic creak, like something breathing. The smell of fresh-cut timber mixes with the salt air and the smoke from cooking fires. The people who come are not all Dutch. That is one of the surprising things about this small, muddy settlement from the very beginning. There are Walloons from what is now Belgium. There are Germans and Scandinavians. There are enslaved Africans, brought here by the company, their labor woven into the foundation of everything being built. There are Jewish merchants who will arrive later, fleeing persecution in Brazil, carrying their prayers and their skills across the Atlantic. Even in these early years, this place is already more than one thing. The streets, if you can call them that, are narrow and unpaved. Mud in the rain, dust in the dry season. Pigs wander freely, goats too. The sound of the settlement is a small and ordinary sound. Hammers, voices in several languages, the creak of a wagon wheel, a child calling out in Dutch, and around all of it, always, the water, the East River on one side, the North River, what Hudson had sailed, on the other, the harbour opening out to the south, wide and grey, and full of possibility. The Dutch are practical people. They are here to trade, not to dream. They want beaver pelts and timber, and a reliable route for ships. They build a wall across the northern edge of their settlement to keep out trouble, a rough wooden barrier, more symbolic than strong. But something else is being built here too, something harder to see and harder to name. A place where many kinds of people arrive, pressed together by water on all sides, learning slowly how to share a small piece of land. You stand at the edge of it now, the harbour ahead of you, the young settlement behind, the windmill turning in the salt-heavy air. Something is just beginning. The morning air settles against your skin like cool linen. There is a slight dampness to it, the kind that clings to your forearms and the back of your neck. The harbour is already stirring. You can hear the low creak of rope against wood, the soft knock of a hull against the dock. The smell of salt is still there, just as it was last night, but now it is mixed with something earthier. Wood smoke. Bread, maybe, from somewhere nearby. This is New Amsterdam in its early decades. A small, busy, imperfect place. You walk along the waterfront, and the ground beneath your feet is uneven. Mud and planking and loose stone, all pressed together by years of foot traffic and weather. The Dutch West India Company built this settlement to make money. That was always the honest truth of it. Beaver pelts moved through this port in great numbers. So did wampum, the shell beads that the Lenape people had long used in trade, and which the Dutch quickly learned to use as currency too. Everything here had a price. Everything was being counted. The colony was never very large. By the 1640s, maybe 400 or 500 people lived on the southern tip of this island. But those people came from many places. That is something worth pausing on. Travelers who passed through in those years noted hearing more than a dozen languages spoken in the streets. Dutch, yes, but also Portuguese, French, German, Swedish, and several African languages. Enslaved people had been brought here by the Dutch West India Company from early on, and their presence shaped the colony in ways that are quiet but real. They built walls, they cleared land, they ground grain. The city you know today was built on their labor, and it is important to hold that gently but honestly. You step away from the waterfront and into the lanes of the settlement. The houses are narrow and close together. Their stepped gable roofs remind you of the Netherlands, which was entirely the point. The Dutch built what they knew. Brick where they could get it, wood where they could not. Gardens behind the houses, small and practical, growing cabbages and herbs. But not everything was orderly. The Dutch West India Company was often more interested in its profits in Brazil and the Caribbean than in this northern outpost. The governors they sent were sometimes capable, sometimes not. Peter Minuit, Willem Kieft, Peter Stuyvesant, each man left a different mark. Kieft, in the early 1640s, made decisions that led to terrible violence with the Lenape people. Villages were attacked, trust was broken in ways that could not easily be repaired. The details are painful, and the consequences rippled outward for years. You can feel the tension in the texture of this place, even now, even in the quiet of the morning. A settlement trying to grow, a company trying to profit, indigenous peoples watching their land change around them, enslaved people building a city that was not theirs. It is a complicated inheritance, and the city has been carrying it ever since. By the 1650s, the little colony was more settled, more established. A wall had been built across the northern edge of the settlement, a wooden palisade meant to mark a boundary and offer some protection. That wall gave its name to the street that would one day stand in its place. You probably know that street. But here, now, it is just timber and mud, and the sound of wind moving through the gaps. Peter Stuyvesant arrived in 1647 and ran the colony with a firm hand. He was not always liked. He argued with merchants, with religious dissenters, with anyone who challenged his authority. But he also built. He organized. He gave the settlement a shape it had been lacking. The smell of bread is stronger now. Someone has opened a door nearby. Warm air drifts out, carrying yeast and something sweet. You breathe it in slowly. This little place at the edge of a great harbor, it was messy and unequal and full of contradictions. But it was also alive in a way that is hard to describe. People were arriving. People were trading, arguing, planting, building. Languages were mixing. The river kept moving. The tides kept coming in and going out. And somewhere, in all of that noise and effort and imperfection, a city was beginning to understand what it might one day become. You let that thought settle quietly, like the cool morning air against your skin, like the slow creak of a boat finding its rest against the dock. There is something almost sweet on the air tonight, a faint trace of pipe tobacco, warm and woody, drifting in from somewhere just beyond the window. You breathe it in slowly. It settles at the back of your throat, like the end of a long day, like a door quietly closing. And that is exactly where we are. The gate has just shut. The day's trading is done. The Dutch colony of New Amsterdam has been a busy, noisy, wonderfully tangled little place, full of many languages, many faces, many small ambitions. But something is about to change. Something already has, in fact. You just haven't felt it yet. It is the summer of 1664, and across the water, a fleet of English warships is sailing into the harbor. You can hear them before you see them clearly. The low creak of timber, the slow pull of canvas in the wind. 4 frigates, moving with a kind of unhurried certainty. They are not rushing. They don't need to. The English already know how this will end. The Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, knows it too. He is a proud man, a stubborn man, a man with a wooden leg, and a very strong opinion about almost everything. He wants to fight. He wants to fire the cannons and hold the fort and make the English earn every inch of this place. But the people of the town, the merchants, the farmers, the families who have built their lives here, they are tired. They have seen enough uncertainty. The smell of gunpowder holds no romance for them. They want their bakeries to open in the morning. They want their children to sleep safely. They send Stuyvesant a letter, signed by nearly 100 people, asking him, gently but firmly, to let it go. And so he does. On the 8th of September, 1664, New Amsterdam becomes New York, named for the Duke of York, who is the brother of the English king. The transfer is quiet, almost gentle. No battle, no blood, just a signature and a change of flag, and the slow work of becoming something new. You imagine what that morning feels like for the people still living here. The same cobblestones under your feet, the same smell of the river, salt and mud and fish, the same bread baking somewhere nearby, warm and yeasty, drifting out from a Dutch kitchen that hasn't changed its recipe and doesn't plan to. Because here is the thing. English take the city, but they don't erase it. Not right away. Not really. The Dutch families stay. The Dutch street names stay. Many of the old ways of doing business stay. The English are practical people. They understand that a working town is worth more than a ruined one. Still, things do shift, slowly. The way seasons shift, you don't notice the exact moment, but one day, the light is different. English law comes in. English courts. English customs. The old Dutch system of local self-governance begins to fade, replaced by something more controlled, more centralized. The English crown wants this colony to be useful, to produce, to trade, to fill ships with furs and timber and goods that will cross the Atlantic and make someone in London very comfortable. And New York, still finding its new name in its own mouth, begins to grow into that role. The population climbs. Slowly at first, then steadily, English settlers arrive. So do more enslaved Africans, brought by force to work in homes and on farms and along the docks. Their presence shapes the city in ways that are rarely written down, but are always felt. In the food, in the music, in the rhythms of daily life along the waterfront. The streets get a little longer. The buildings get a little taller. The harbor gets busier. And through all of it, the city keeps that old habit it learned from its very beginning, the habit of mixing, of layering, of being more than one thing at once. You can taste it even now if you pay attention. Something Dutch in the softness of the bread. Something English in the structure of the streets. Something older and deeper underneath it all, in the dark soil that holds the roots of every building ever raised here. The city is changing hands, but the city itself, this particular patch of island, this particular bend in the river, the city is still becoming. And tonight, it holds its breath just a little, waiting to see what it will be asked to carry next. The flags have settled now. The red and white of the British colours hang still in the harbour air, catching the early light in a way that feels almost ordinary, as if they have always been there, as if this city has always known this particular shade of red. And in some ways, it is starting to feel that way. You stand near the waterfront, and you watch the morning come in slowly. The East River is pale and silver at this hour. Small boats move across it with quiet purpose. A larger vessel sits heavy and low in the water, loaded with goods from somewhere far away. You can see the ropes straining gently at the dock, holding it in place while men move around it in the half-light, voices low, breath rising in small clouds. New York. They are calling it that now, fully and without hesitation. New York. The name has settled into the streets, the way a word does when people stop thinking about it and simply use it. The city is growing. You can feel it in the way the ground itself seems busier underfoot. The cobblestones near the docks are worn smooth from so many feet, so many carts, so many barrels rolled and dragged and hauled. You step carefully across them and notice how the stone is cold and damp beneath your shoes, slick with the morning moisture that comes off the river. The smell here is layered, salt water, always. But underneath that, something earthier, timber and tar, the sharp bite of rope and canvas, the faint sweetness of molasses being unloaded somewhere nearby. Trade has a smell. It is not always a pleasant one, but it is alive. By the 1700s, this port is one of the busiest in the British colonies. Ships come and go with a rhythm that the people of the city have grown used to, the way you grow used to the sound of rain on a roof. Goods arrive from England, from the Caribbean, from ports you would need a map to find. Sugar, cloth, spices, and yes, still that tea. That same faint bitterness you carried with you from before, now a daily comfort for those who can afford it. The city spreads northward, slowly but steadily. Streets are laid out with a kind of careful intention. Merchants build solid houses, brick and stone, with wide front windows to let in the light. You pass one now and glance through the glass. Inside, a woman is arranging something on a shelf. You cannot quite see what. A candle flickers on a table. The room looks warm. The wealthier families are building lives here that feel permanent. Not temporary, not provisional, permanent. There are churches with proper steeples. There are taverns where men sit for hours, talking quietly over pipes and ale. The low murmur of conversation filling the room like smoke. There is a post office now, a printing press. Small things, but they matter. They are the things that make a place feel real. And yet, not everyone shares in this comfort equally. The city's growth rests on labor, much of it enslaved. African men and women work in the homes, on the docks, in the fields, just beyond the city's edge. Their presence is woven into the fabric of everything you see, and their lives are constrained in ways that the city's prosperity quietly depends upon and rarely speaks of. You feel the weight of that as you walk. The warmth of the morning does not quite reach everywhere. Still, the city moves forward. It does not pause to reflect. That is the nature of a growing place. It is always looking ahead, always adding something new, always making room for the next ship, the next merchant, the next season. You find a quiet spot near the water's edge, away from the bustle of the docks. The river laps softly against the stone below you. A gull calls once, and then goes quiet. You can taste salt on your lips from the breeze coming off the water. The city behind you hums with its own life. Carts, voices, the distant ring of a hammer on metal. Somewhere, someone is baking bread. You catch the faint warmth of it on the air, just for a moment, before the river wind takes it away. You breathe out slowly. This is a city finding its shape, not finished, not settled, but finding it, day by day, ship by ship, brick by careful brick. And for now, in this quiet morning moment, that feels like enough. The sound comes before anything else. It is a low murmur at first, like the city is talking to itself. Voices in doorways, voices in taverns, voices leaning close over wooden tables, speaking in careful, measured tones. Boston has always been a city of conversation, but something in the quality of it has changed. There is an edge now, a sharpness underneath the ordinary hum of daily life. You notice it when you walk through the streets in the early morning. The cobblestones are still wet from the night, cool and slick under your feet. The harbor is there behind you, the same harbor that has always been there, its water grey and patient. But the docks feel different now. The men unloading crates move with a kind of tension in their shoulders. They talk less, or they talk more quietly. It is the year after the war with France has ended. Britain has won, and the empire is enormous now, stretching further than anyone can easily imagine. But enormous empires are expensive things, and someone has to pay for them. The news arrives in pieces, the way news always does. A new tax on paper, on legal documents, on newspapers and pamphlets, and even playing cards. The Stamp Act, they are calling it. And the reaction in Boston is immediate and fierce. You can hear it in the print shops, where the smell of ink is thick and sharp in the air. The printers are busy. Their presses are running late into the evening, producing pamphlets and broadsides that get passed from hand to hand, read aloud in taverns, pinned to walls. The words on those pages are careful and pointed. They ask a question that is starting to feel urgent. If the colonists have no voice in the parliament that taxes them, then what exactly is their relationship to that parliament? It is a question that hangs in the air like smoke. The Old South meeting house fills with people. You can feel the warmth of bodies packed close together, the smell of wool coats and tallow candles. The voices rise and fall. Some are angry. Some are cautious. Some are trying to find a middle path that may not exist anymore. Samuel Adams is here, his hands never quite still, his voice carrying easily across the room. He has a gift for making people feel that what they are thinking is not only reasonable but necessary. Outside, the streets are not always calm. There are nights when the mood turns rough. Windows get broken. A stamp distributor resigns his post before he has even begun. The Stamp Act never really takes hold in Boston, and within a year it is repealed. But repealed does not mean forgotten, because the taxes keep coming back in different shapes. The Townshend Acts bring new duties on glass, on paper, on paint, on tea, and with the taxes come the soldiers. By 1768, British troops are quartered in the city. You can hear their boots on the cobblestones at night, a steady, deliberate sound. They stand at corners. They watch the market. Their red coats are vivid against the pale grey of a Boston winter. The city does not like it. The city makes its feelings known in small ways and large ones. Merchants agree not to import British goods. Women gather in homes and spin their own cloth rather than buy English fabric. There is something quietly powerful in that. A whole city choosing discomfort as a form of argument. You sit for a moment near the waterfront, your hands wrapped around a cup of something warm. The tea, of course, is not British. That has become a kind of statement all on its own. The harbour is just visible from here, the masts of ships rising against a pale sky. The water is dark and cold. There is a pamphlet on the table beside you, its edge is already soft from being handled. You do not need to read it again. You already know what it says. It says that something has shifted, that the relationship between this city and the government across the ocean has become something that neither side fully understands anymore. The lanterns along the docks still glow at night, just as they always have. The light still touches the water in the same quiet way, but the city breathing underneath those lights is not the same city it was even a few years ago. Something is gathering. You can feel it in the cool air off the harbour. You can hear it in the murmur of voices that never quite goes still. Boston is holding its breath. The smell reaches you before anything else. It is smoke, but not the comfortable kind. Not the smell of a hearth or a cooking fire or candles burning low in a tavern window. This is something heavier, something that clings to the back of your throat and stays there. It is the smell of a city in distress. It is September of 1776, and New York is burning. Not all of it, but enough. A fire has broken out in the lower part of the city, and the wind is carrying it northward through the wooden streets. No one is quite sure how it started. Some say accident, some say something else. But in the morning, when the smoke finally begins to thin, nearly 500 buildings are gone. Just ash and silence, where there used to be homes and shops, and the ordinary noise of daily life. You stand somewhere near the edge of what remains, and you can feel the warmth still rising from the ground beneath your feet. The stones hold heat long after the flames are gone. That is something you did not expect. How the earth remembers. The British have been in control of New York since late August. It happened quickly, and it happened hard. General Washington and the Continental Army fought on Long Island, and they lost. They retreated across the river in the night, quietly, through fog that seemed almost merciful. And then the city changed hands. For the next 7 years, New York would be a British city. Think about that for a moment. 7 years. Long enough for children to grow into young adults. Long enough for a whole way of life to settle in around the occupation like sediment in still water. The British soldiers moved into homes. They stabled horses in churches. They turned other churches into prisons, and those prisons were not gentle places. The Sugar House on Liberty Street, which had once smelled of molasses and trade, became a holding place for American prisoners of war. Men were kept there in cold and hunger. Many did not survive. And yet the city kept breathing. Markets still opened in the mornings. Bread was still baked. The harbor still filled with ships, though now they flew different flags. Life under occupation has its own strange rhythm. People adapt because they have to. They find small ways to keep going. Some New Yorkers were loyalists. They supported the crown. And for them, this period felt almost like stability. Others had fled before the British arrived, following Washington north, carrying what they could. The city they left behind was not the city they had known. You can almost smell that absence, if such a thing is possible. The emptiness of rooms that used to be full. The quiet of streets that used to argue and laugh. But even in occupation, there were threads of resistance. Information moved through the city in careful, hidden ways. Names were kept secret. Messages were passed in ordinary-looking objects, tucked inside everyday life. People found ways to be brave that left no visible mark. Out in the harbor, the water is dark and cold tonight. You can hear it, faintly, lapping against the docks. A soft, patient sound. The harbor has seen so much by now. The Dutch traders, the English merchants, the slave ships, the tea ships, the warships. It holds all of it without comment. The war is happening elsewhere mostly. In Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in the southern colonies. New York is the occupied city, the headquarters, the place the British hold tightly because they know how much it matters. Control the harbor, control the trade routes, and you control a great deal. But the war is turning, slowly, the way seasons turn. Not all at once, just a degree at a time, until one morning you notice the light is different. By 1783, it will be over. The Treaty of Paris will be signed. The British will prepare to leave. And on a November day, the last of their ships will sail out of this harbor, and the city will exhale, long and slow and deep. For the first time in 7 years, Washington will ride back in. The streets will fill with people who have been waiting. But that is still ahead. For now, the city is quiet under occupation. The smoke has settled. The harbor laps softly in the dark. And somewhere in a small room, by the light of a single candle, someone is still holding on. That is what cities do in the end. They hold on. And so do you. The air still carries a kind of roughness against your skin. A grit. Something left over from those fires, from the smoke that hung so thick over the streets just days before. You run your fingers along the wooden railing of a doorway on Broad Street and feel the faint film of ash still settled there. It is cool to the touch. Quiet now. The city is catching its breath. New York in the winter of 1783 is a city learning to be itself again. The British have gone. Their ships moved out through the harbor, slow and heavy, disappearing into the grey of the upper bay. And what they left behind is a city that feels both familiar and strange. Streets you might have known before the war are the same streets. and yet somehow different. Buildings stand where buildings stood before, but the people inside them are different now. The Loyalists who sheltered under British rule have mostly sailed away too, to Nova Scotia, to England, to wherever felt safer than this new and uncertain place. What remains is a city of about 20,000 souls, smaller than it once was, quieter in some ways, but there is something underneath the quiet, a hum, a low and cautious excitement. You walk down toward the waterfront, and the smell reaches you before anything else. Salt and timber, and the faint sweetness of rope tar drying in the cold. The docks are beginning to move again. Merchants are returning. Cargo is shifting. The harbour, which was so long a place of British control, is slowly becoming something else. Something that belongs to the people standing on its edges. And then comes the spring of 1789. And with it, something no one in this city has ever seen before. George Washington arrives in New York by barge. You can almost feel the stillness of that moment. The crowd gathered at the waterfront, the oars moving through the grey water, the man himself standing near the bow. There are flowers thrown. There is music somewhere behind you, faint and slightly out of tune. The air smells of the river and of something else, something harder to name, possibility maybe, or the particular nervousness that comes with beginning something that has never been done before. New York is the capital of the United States, the first capital, and Federal Hall on Wall Street is where it all begins. You stand outside that building and look up at its columns, freshly renovated, the stones still pale and clean. Inside, on the balcony that faces the street, Washington places his hand on a Bible and takes an oath. His voice, they say, is low, almost too low to hear from where you are standing. But the crowd hears enough, and when it is done, a sound rises up from the streets around you. Not quite a cheer, not quite a shout. Something warmer than that, a long exhale of something held for a very long time. The city moves fast after that. Congress meets. Debates fill the air of those rooms on Wall Street. You can almost hear them through the walls if you press close. Voices rising and falling, the scrape of chairs, the occasional thump of a hand on a table. These are the early arguments of a country figuring out what it wants to be, what it owes its people, what it can ask of them in return. The streets outside are busy in a different way now. There are diplomats in fine coats. There are printers working late into the night, their windows lit yellow against the dark. There are coffee houses where men lean close over small tables, speaking in low voices about tariffs and treaties, and the shape of a new government. You sit near one of those fires for a moment, warming your hands, and listen to the murmur of it all around you. The taste of the coffee is bitter and strong. Someone nearby is eating bread still warm from the oven. The fire pops softly. Outside, a cart rolls over cobblestones, its sound fading slowly down the street. It lasts only a little more than a year, this chapter. New York, as the seat of the new nation. By 1790, the capital moves to Philadelphia, and then eventually to a new city being built in the south, on land carved from Maryland and Virginia. But something stays behind. Something that settles into the stones of this city and does not leave. New York has held something enormous, has been, for one brief shining moment, the place where a country first tried to speak with one voice. And the city, even now, still carries a little of that feeling. There is something almost sweet about that moment. Ink still wet. Words just set down. The future not yet decided. You can almost taste it on the air. Something like iron, something like rain. The particular sharpness of a new beginning. And in the years that follow the revolution, that taste lingers over the young city. Philadelphia in the 1780s and 1790s is a place still learning what it is. The war is over. The arguments are just getting started. You walk through the streets in the early morning, when the air is cool and the cobblestones are still damp from the night. The city smells of wood smoke and river water, and the faint sweetness of bread baking somewhere nearby. A bakery door is open. A woman sweeps her step. A horse waits patiently at a hitching post, its breath rising in small white clouds. This is a city of nearly 40,000 people now. It is the largest city in North America. And it carries that weight quietly, the way a person carries responsibility, not always gracefully, but always forward. The State House, the one you might know as Independence Hall, still stands at the center of civic life. You pass it on your way through the city. Its brick is warm in the morning light, almost orange. The bell in its tower has rung for celebrations and for mourning. It rings now for ordinary days too, which is its own kind of miracle. Inside rooms like these, and in the new halls being built and debated, men are trying to figure out how a city governs itself, how a young republic actually works, not in theory, in practice. In the daily, difficult, sometimes tedious work of building institutions. The Bank of North America is already here, established just a few years before. You can feel its presence in the city, a steadying weight, like a hand on a shoulder. Commerce moves through Philadelphia like blood through a body. Ships come up the Delaware. Goods are unloaded. Merchants count and record and argue over prices in counting houses that smell of tallow and old paper. And then there are the newspapers. Oh, the newspapers. Philadelphia in this period is alive with print. You pass a printer's shop and hear the press before you see it. That rhythmic thump and hiss. The smell of ink so strong it almost stings your nose. Words are being made into things you can hold. Opinions are being pressed into permanence. The papers argue about everything. About the new Constitution, ratified in 1788. About what kind of country this should be. About trade. About slavery. About who counts as a citizen and who does not. These are not comfortable conversations, but they are happening loudly and in public and in ink. You sit for a moment on a low step near the market. Someone has left a broadsheet nearby, its edges curling in the morning air. You pick it up. The type is small and slightly uneven. The words are urgent. You set it down gently when you are done, the way you might set down something borrowed. Philadelphia is also building the quieter kinds of institutions now. Libraries, philosophical societies, the College of Physicians. These are places where knowledge is meant to gather and be shared. You can imagine the rooms, candlelit, a little smoky, smelling of old books, and wool coats damp from the rain outside. Men and women leaning toward each other across tables, trying to understand the world a little better. The city is also grappling, painfully, with the question of slavery. Pennsylvania passed the Gradual Abolition Act in 1780, the first of its kind in the new nation. But gradual means slow, and slow means that freedom, for many people, is still something just out of reach. The free black community in Philadelphia is growing, organizing, building its own churches and institutions. The African Methodist Episcopal Church will take root here in these very years. That is not a small thing. That is a city finding more of itself. You feel the evening come on slowly. The light goes golden, then amber, then soft grey. The sounds of the day, the carts, the voices, the press, begin to quiet. Someone lights a lamp in a window above you. Its glow is warm and small and steady. The city is not finished. It will never quite be finished. But tonight it rests. The ink has dried on the page. The words are set. And somewhere in the hush between one day and the next, Philadelphia breathes out, slowly, quietly, and holds what it has made. The morning comes in layers. First, a pale grey softness at the edge of the sky, then a slow brightening, like someone turning up a lamp in a distant room, and then light. Real light, spilling across the water in long golden ribbons that stretch and shimmer and never quite hold still. You are standing at the edge of something new. The year is somewhere in the 1820s, and the air along the waterway smells of fresh-cut earth and wet stone, and the particular sharpness of a morning that has not yet decided what it wants to be. There is dew on the grass beneath your feet, cool and soft. The ground here has been turned over recently. You can feel the looseness of it, the way it gives just slightly under your weight, and stretching out before you, as far as your eyes can follow, is the canal. It is not grand in the way that mountains are grand, or oceans. It is grand in a quieter way, a human way. A long, still ribbon of water, cut by hand through the earth, running west to east with a kind of patient purpose that feels almost alive. The surface catches the early light and holds it. You watch a leaf drift slowly across the water and disappear around a gentle bend. Someone nearby is already working. You can hear the low creak of a rope, the soft thud of wood against wood, the murmur of voices that are not quite awake yet. A mule stands patiently at the towpath, its breath making small clouds in the cool air. It does not seem bothered by anything. It has done this before. It will do it again. The Erie Canal opened in 1825, and nothing in this part of the world was ever quite the same after that. Before it, moving goods across New York was slow and expensive and uncertain. The land was difficult. The distances were enormous. A barrel of flour might take weeks to travel what the canal could carry in days. And the cost was the thing that changed everything. Shipping goods along the canal was so much cheaper than overland travel that merchants who had never dreamed of reaching distant markets suddenly found those markets open to them. You think about that for a moment. About what it means when a door that was always closed simply opens. Buffalo, sitting at the western end of the canal, became something extraordinary, almost overnight. Goods from the interior of the continent, grain, timber, furs, all the raw materials of a growing country, poured into the city. And from Buffalo, they traveled east along the canal to Albany, and then down the Hudson River to New York City, and from there, out into the world, the city filled with people. You can almost feel it, standing here, the pressure of arrival. Boats coming in one after another, low in the water with their loads. Workers on the docks, their hands rough and calloused, their voices mixing together in a dozen different languages. The smell of grain and sawdust, and the faint sweetness of fresh lumber. The sound of hammers, always hammers, buildings going up faster than anyone had planned for. Warehouses appeared along the waterfront, then banks, then hotels, then churches and schools, and all the other things that a city needs when it begins to believe in itself. And it did believe in itself. That is perhaps the most remarkable thing. There was a confidence in Buffalo during these years, a sense that this place, this particular bend in the geography of the continent, had been chosen for something, that the canal had not just connected the city to the world, but had revealed what the city had always been capable of becoming. You crouch down near the water's edge. The canal is still and clear close to the bank. You can see the bottom, smooth stones, a little silt, the slow drift of something you cannot quite name. You reach out and let your fingers rest just at the surface. The water is cold, surprisingly cold for a summer morning. It comes from a long way away. That is the thing about the canal that no one quite tells you. It is not just a channel for goods. It is a channel for distance itself, for the feeling that somewhere far away is suddenly, almost impossibly, close. The mule shifts its weight on the towpath. The rope tightens. Somewhere behind you, a boat begins to move, and the city leans forward, just slightly, into everything that is coming. You can hear the city before you can see it. Even from a distance, Manhattan hums. There is the low knock of cartwheels on stone, a call of a vendor somewhere down a narrow street, the creak of a sign swinging gently above a doorway. These sounds layer over each other, soft and constant, like water moving beneath ice. The city is always awake, always building itself. It is the early 1800s now, and Manhattan is growing fast. Faster than anyone quite expected. You walk along one of the lowest streets, near the old part of town. The cobblestones are uneven beneath your feet. You can feel each one through the thin soles of your shoes. The air smells of horses and river mud, and something warm, bread, maybe, or boiling grain from a kitchen somewhere nearby. It is not a clean smell exactly, but it is a living one. The streets down here follow old paths. Cow paths, some people say. Trails worn into the earth long before the city had any plan at all. They curve and narrow. They meet at odd angles. If you turn the wrong way, you can find yourself in a dead end, facing a blank wooden fence. But walk north, just a little, and something changes. The streets straighten. They run clean and parallel, crossing each other at right angles, stretching away from you in long, quiet lines. This is the grid, and in this moment, standing at the edge of it, you can feel the difference between the old city and the new one. One grew like a vine. The other was drawn with a ruler. The commissioner's plan was approved in 1811. 12 avenues running north to south, 155 streets running east to west. A simple, repeating pattern laid over the whole island, from Houston Street all the way up to the distant northern hills. The men who designed it were practical. They were thinking about movement, about trade, about how to fit as many people and buildings as possible into a long, narrow island. They were not thinking much about parks or rivers or the shape of the land beneath. And so the grid does not bend for hills. It does not pause for streams. It simply continues, block after block, as if the earth itself must learn to follow the plan. You run your hand along a wooden fence post at the corner of a half-built block. The wood is rough and still smells faintly of pine sap. The lot behind it is empty for now. Just packed earth and a few weeds pushing up through the dirt. But you know it will not stay empty long, because the people are coming. They arrive by ship mostly. From Ireland, from Germany, from England and beyond. They come through the harbour and into the lower wards of the city, where the streets are crowded and the buildings lean close together. They bring almost nothing. A bundle of clothes, a name, a hope that is not quite a plan. The city absorbs them, slowly, imperfectly. New neighborhoods press outward. Boarding houses fill. Markets stretch along the avenues. The sound of different languages floats out of open windows on warm afternoons. A word of German, a phrase of Irish English, a child laughing in a tongue you do not recognize. And all of it, somehow, fits inside the grid. That is the quiet genius of the plan, perhaps. It does not care who you are or where you came from. Every block is the same size. Every corner meets at the same angle. The grid holds everyone equally in its plain, unhurried way. You stand at an intersection now, looking north. The avenue stretches ahead of you, long and straight, disappearing into a soft haze. On either side, buildings rise 2 and 3 stories. Some are brick, some are still wood. A woman hangs laundry from a second-floor window, and the white cloth moves gently in the breeze. A dog trots past you without looking up. The city smells of coal smoke now, just a little. The afternoons are getting cooler. Autumn is settling in. You think about the canal waters you imagined not so long ago, stretching westward toward open land and open sky, and you realize that Manhattan had its own kind of horizon. Not water and prairie, but streets and blocks, repeating northward, block after block after block, all the way to the top of the island. A different kind of endless, a different kind of dream. You breathe in slowly. The city hums around you, steady and unhurried. And you let yourself rest inside that sound. There is a smell in the air tonight that is hard to name. It is something like coal smoke and something like river mud, and underneath both of those, something sharper, something that does not quite belong to the city you have come to know. You breathe it in slowly, standing near the edge of the street, and you feel it settle at the back of your throat, a little bitter, a little uneasy. The hammers have gone quiet now. The stone dust has settled. The skyline that was growing so steadily, so confidently, seems to hold its breath tonight. And the city holds its breath with it. The year is 1861, and something far away has just changed everything close. You have heard the word by now. Everyone has. War. It moves through New York the way a cold wind moves through an open window, sudden and impossible to ignore. People say it quietly in doorways. They say it loudly in taverns. They argue about it on street corners near the docks, where the smell of salt water and fish and old rope mingles with the smoke from 100 chimneys. New York is not a simple city. It never has been. And in this moment, that complexity is written on every face you pass. Walk down Broadway, and you will feel it. The cobblestones are the same beneath your feet, uneven, worn smooth in places, rough in others. The gas lamps are the same. The shop windows still glow with bolts of fabric and polished goods. But the conversations have changed. The silences have changed. There is a tension in the air that you can almost touch, like the feeling just before a summer storm when the air goes very still and very heavy. New York is a city of commerce. You already know this. The merchants here have grown rich on cotton, southern cotton, picked by enslaved hands and shipped north and then across the ocean. The threads of that trade run through the counting houses of Lower Manhattan, through the banks, through the shipping offices along the waterfront. Some of the wealthiest men in this city have looked south and seen not suffering but profit. And now those threads are being pulled tight, and then tighter still. But New York is also a city of immigrants, of working people, of men and women who came here with very little and built something from almost nothing. And many of them feel the pull of the union deeply, personally, in a way that has nothing to do with cotton or commerce. You can hear both sides if you listen. A group of men outside a saloon near the Five Points neighborhood speak in low, heated voices. Their accents are Irish mostly. Their hands are rough from work. They are not sure what this war means for them. They are not sure whose side they are supposed to be on. or whether anyone in power has ever truly been on theirs. A few streets north, a woman pins a small flag to her window. Her hands are careful and deliberate. She smooths the fabric gently, the way you might smooth a letter you have read many times. Her son has already enlisted. She does not know where he is tonight. The smell of printer's ink drifts past you from a newspaper office. The presses are running late. They always run late now. There is always something new to report, something shifting, something uncertain. You catch a headline through the window, but you do not stop to read it. You already feel the weight of it without the words. This is what war does to a city that is not on the battlefield. It does not arrive with cannon fire. It arrives in the smell of ink and smoke. It arrives in the conversations that stop when a stranger walks by. It arrives in the empty chair at a supper table, in the letter that has not come, in the question that no one quite knows how to answer. New York in 1861 is a city that contains multitudes, as it always has. But now those multitudes are pulling in different directions. The loyalties here are divided in ways that run deeper than politics, deeper than geography. They run through families, through neighborhoods, through the very streets you're walking. You pause at a corner and look up. The sky above the rooftops is dark and clear. A few stars are visible between the chimneys. The city murmurs around you, restless and uncertain. Something is beginning. You can feel it in the air, in the stillness between sounds, in the way the city seems to be waiting, just waiting, to find out what it truly is. The air has gone still now. That sharp edge has softened. And what you notice first, stepping into the quieter days that follow, is the feeling of the ground beneath your feet, uneven, worn, pressed down by years of boots and worry and waiting. The earth of Atlanta in these years after the war feels like something that has been squeezed too hard and is only slowly remembering how to breathe again. You reach out and touch the wall of a building on Peachtree Street. The brick is rough under your fingers, pitted, some of it scorched still, even now, even years on. The city did not hide its wounds. It wore them plainly, the way a person does when they are too tired to pretend otherwise. Atlanta in 1865 is a city of rubble and resolve in almost equal measure. The war is over. The guns are quiet, but quiet is not the same as peaceful, and you understand that quickly here. There are people everywhere, more people than the city has ever held. Freedmen and freedwomen walking streets they were never allowed to walk freely before. Former soldiers, some in tattered grey, some in blue, all of them blinking at a world that has shifted under them. Families looking for other families, people looking for work, people looking for themselves. You smell wood smoke and sawdust. Everywhere, something is being built or rebuilt. The sound of hammers is almost constant, a steady, patient rhythm that becomes the heartbeat of these years. Tap, tap. It is not triumphant. It is just necessary. The federal government has sent soldiers and agents to help manage what they call Reconstruction. The Freedmen's Bureau opens offices here. You can picture the small rooms, the long lines, the careful handwriting in ledgers as names are recorded. Names that belong to people who now, for the first time, are legally free to give them. There is something quietly enormous in that. Something that does not announce itself loudly, but sits heavy and real in the air. For Black Atlantans, these years hold both possibility and danger in the same breath. Schools begin to open. Churches become gathering places, anchors, the warm and steady centers of community life. You can almost hear the singing from one of those churches on a Sunday morning, voices rising through plain wooden walls, out into the dusty street. into the soft Georgia air. It is the sound of people claiming something, claiming themselves. And yet the ground is unsteady. Old power does not release easily. There are tensions that simmer just beneath the surface of every ordinary day. You feel it in the way certain conversations stop when certain people walk past, in the careful way some folks move through space, aware of who is watching. Atlanta's white leadership is navigating its own complicated grief and anger. The city that prided itself on commerce and ambition must now rebuild not just its buildings, but its entire sense of itself. Some embrace the change, or at least accept it. Others resist in ways both open and quiet. But the city keeps moving. That is the thing about Atlanta that you begin to understand in these years. It does not stay still long enough to give in to despair. There is something almost restless in its character, a forward-leaning quality, like a person always just about to take the next step. By 1868, Georgia is readmitted to the Union. Atlanta becomes the state capital the following year. You can feel the shift in the city's posture when that happens. A kind of straightening, a sense of arrival, even if arrival is complicated, even if the road here was painful and the road ahead is unclear. You sit for a moment on a low wooden step outside a small shop. The evening air is warm and thick with the smell of turned earth and something faintly sweet, honeysuckle, maybe, growing up along a fence nearby. A child runs past, bare feet slapping the dirt, laughing at something you cannot see. Somewhere, a door closes softly. The city is not healed. It will not be healed for a long time, and some of what was broken here will take generations to even begin to understand. But tonight, in the fading light of these first years of Reconstruction, there is something present that feels like the earliest, most fragile form of hope. Not loud, not certain, just there, like a small flame cupped in two careful hands, sheltered from the wind. You breathe out slowly. The hammers have stopped for the evening. The city rests, just a little, before tomorrow begins again. The taste of salt is the first thing you notice. Not the sharp, clean salt of the sea air, something older than that. Something that has traveled a very long way to reach your tongue. It is the taste of a hard journey nearly finished. Of bread eaten in a ship's hold, of tears dried on a cheek days ago, leaving just the faintest trace behind. You are standing near the water's edge in the early morning. The sky is the color of a bruise turning soft, deep purple at the edges, pale and milky where the sun is just beginning to think about rising. The harbor is quiet, but it is not empty. It is never empty anymore. The year is somewhere in the 1880s, and New York is becoming something it has never quite been before. Out on the water, a ship sits heavy and low. Another one. There have been so many. The steamships come from Hamburg and Liverpool, from Naples and Odessa, from ports whose names most people in this city cannot yet pronounce. They come carrying people, hundreds of people, sometimes more than 1,000 on a single vessel. You can hear the water lapping softly against the dock pilings. A slow, patient sound. The wood is wet and dark beneath your feet, and the cold of it seeps up through the soles of your shoes. Somewhere nearby, a gull calls once, and then goes quiet. The people on that ship have been traveling for weeks. Some of them have been planning this journey for years. They sold what they had. They said goodbye to people they may never see again. They carried their most important things in cloth bundles and battered trunks, a photograph, a prayer book, a small piece of embroidered cloth that smells like home. By now, that smell is fading, replaced by the smell of the ship. Engine oil and salt water, and too many people in too small a space. But this morning, the journey is almost over. You watch as the ship moves slowly, slowly toward the processing station on the small island in the harbor. The island that will soon carry the name Ellis Island into the memory of millions of families. The buildings there are still modest at this point. The grand hall that people will one day remember has not yet been built. But the process is already underway. The careful, sometimes frightening process of arrival. The people who step off that ship will be examined. Their eyes, their hands, their lungs. They will be asked questions through interpreters. They will wait in lines that feel endless when you are tired and frightened and unsure of what comes next. Some of them will be turned away. That is a hard truth, and it sits quietly in the morning air. But most of them will pass through, and when they do, they will step onto the soil of a city that is already changing because of them. You think about what this city sounded like just a generation ago, and then you think about what it sounds like now. On certain streets in Lower Manhattan, you can walk for an entire block and hear almost no English at all. You hear Yiddish, Italian, Polish, Cantonese. You hear the music of languages braiding together in ways that have never happened before in quite this way, in quite this place. The smells have changed too. The food stalls and pushcarts carry things that did not exist on these streets before. Pickled herring wrapped in newspaper, roasted chestnuts, the warm, yeasty smell of bread, baked in a style brought from a village in Sicily or a town near Warsaw. The city is absorbing all of it, slowly, imperfectly, sometimes painfully, but absorbing it. You think about those hands clasped together in the dark last night, the quiet solidarity of people who understood each other without needing to speak the same language. That moment felt small. But small moments are how cities change. One handshake, one shared meal, one child who grows up speaking two languages and dreams in both. The light is growing now. The purple is giving way to a thin, pale gold along the horizon. The ship on the water catches a little of that light on its hull. Somewhere on board, people are waking up, gathering their bundles, whispering to each other, trying to remember the address they have been given, the name of a cousin who came before them, the first words they learned in a new language. Hello? Please? Thank you. Where do I go? The morning holds its breath with them. The morning light comes in sideways through a narrow window. You notice it first, that pale, thin slice of sky visible between the buildings across the alley. It is not much, maybe 6 inches of grey-blue, but it is yours to look at, and you look. This is what home is for now. A room on the 4th floor of a tenement on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. The year is somewhere in the 1880s, and the building around you is full of life. A kind of life that is pressed close and warm, and sometimes difficult to breathe inside of. The walls are thin. You already know this. You learned it on your first night, lying still, listening to the family next door settle into sleep. A child coughing softly, a man murmuring something in a language you half recognize. The creak of a wooden floor, slow and steady, like someone pacing away a worry. These buildings went up fast. The city needed them. Thousands of people were arriving every year, from southern Italy, from the Russian Empire, from Poland and Hungary and Greece. They came through the harbor, they walked through the streets, and they needed somewhere to sleep. The tenements answered that need, though not always kindly. Your room holds a family of 5. That is not unusual. The hallways hold more. Shared toilets at the end of each floor, shared water from a single tap. The smell of the building is layered, boiled cabbage, coal smoke, damp wool, and underneath it all, something older, something the wood itself has absorbed over years of close living. But here is what the newspapers don't always say. Here is what gets lost in the official reports about overcrowding and poor ventilation. The tenements are also full of something else, something harder to measure. You step out into the hallway, and a neighbor nods at you. She is carrying a basket of mending. Her fingers are already moving, already working, even as she walks. She says something warm in Italian, and you understand the warmth, even if you don't catch every word. That is enough. That is more than enough, some days. Downstairs, the street is already busy. The pushcart vendors are setting up. You can hear the wheels on the cobblestones before you see them. A man is selling pickles from a barrel, and the sharp, briny smell drifts up to you before you even reach the bottom step. You think of yesterday's meal, that first bite from a street cart, still sitting somewhere in your memory like a small bright thing. The neighborhood has its own rhythm. You are starting to feel it. The early morning belongs to the vendors and the workers heading to the garment factories. The middle of the day belongs to the women and children, to the market stalls, to the quick conversations held in doorways. The evening belongs to everyone, to the stoops, to the slow unwinding after long hours, to the sound of someone playing a fiddle 2 buildings over. Community forms in small ways here. It forms in the sharing of a pot of soup when someone is sick. It forms in the way the women on your floor have organized themselves, quietly, without any official name, to look after each other's children when work calls. It forms in the synagogue on the corner, in the Italian social club 3 blocks east, in the German beer hall, where men sit together on Sunday afternoons and speak the old language and feel, for an hour, a little less far from home. Reformers are beginning to notice these streets. Jacob Riis will soon publish his photographs, his words, his arguments about what life here looks like. And he is not wrong about the hardship. The hardship is real. You feel it in your back at the end of a long day. You feel it in the cold that comes through the window frame in winter. But hardship is not the whole story. It never is. You sit on the front stoop as the afternoon softens. A child runs past, laughing at something you didn't see. The smell of bread baking drifts from somewhere nearby. The light is going golden now, catching the dust in the air, making even the narrow alley look almost gentle. You rest your hands on your knees. The stone of the stoop is cool and solid beneath you. You breathe in slowly. The city hums around you, not quietly, never quietly, but steadily, like something that knows it will still be here tomorrow. And slowly, without quite deciding to, you begin to feel that you will be here tomorrow too. The city has grown quieter now. You can hear it, or rather, you can hear what's left when the noise pulls back. A horse's hooves somewhere on cobblestone, slow and unhurried. The distant clang of a cable car settling into its overnight rest. And beneath all of that, almost too soft to notice, the low creak of a building shifting in the cool night air, the way old wood does when the day's warmth finally lets go. The window lights have blinked out, one by one, across the crowded blocks. The working families are asleep. The shop clerks, the laundresses, the men who spent the day hauling and lifting and carrying, they are resting now, tucked into small rooms in tall tenements, their breath slow and even. But not everyone is sleeping. High above the ordinary streets, in rooms that feel like a different world entirely, lamps are still burning, not the thin yellow flicker of gas jets in a shared hallway. Something warmer, something richer, the soft glow of chandeliers hung with hundreds of small crystals, each one catching the light and sending it spinning gently across walls covered in silk and gilded plaster. You step, in your imagination, into one of these rooms. The floor beneath your feet is polished marble, cool and smooth, and your footsteps make almost no sound at all. The air smells faintly of beeswax candles and something floral, roses perhaps, cut fresh and arranged in tall vases. There is a heaviness to the air here, a richness, the way a room smells when money has been spent carefully and often. This is the 1880s, and in this city, as in cities across the country, something remarkable is happening at the very top of society. A small number of families have accumulated wealth on a scale that the world has rarely seen. Industrialists, railroad men, bankers, men who arrived at the right moment in history and held on tightly as the country expanded westward, as steel replaced iron, as telegraph wires stitched the continent together. And they are building. Not just homes, monuments, declarations, structures that say, in stone and marble and carved limestone, that this family has arrived and intends to stay. You can see the buildings even now if you close your eyes and let yourself drift back. Facades that rise 6, 7, 8 stories above the street, turrets and towers. Arched windows framed in ornamental ironwork, cornices so elaborate they look like something borrowed from a European palace. And inside, ballrooms large enough to hold hundreds of guests, libraries lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books, dining rooms with tables that stretch so long you can barely see the person seated at the other end. The architects of this era are busy men. They travel to Paris and Rome and Vienna, filling notebooks with sketches. They come home and translate those sketches into something new, something American, but draped in the language of old European grandeur. Beaux Arts columns, Romanesque arches, Gothic spires rising against a sky that, during the day, is often grey with the smoke of the very industries that paid for all of this. There is something almost dreamlike about it, standing here in the quiet. You run your hand along the edge of a carved wooden banister, mahogany, smooth as glass, cool to the touch. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Somewhere in this building, months ago, a woodworker spent hours on this single curve. A plasterer spent days on the ceiling above you, pressing delicate leaves and scrolls into wet plaster with careful fingers. The wealth is concentrated, yes, held tightly in very few hands, but the hands that built all of this, the stonecutters, the ironworkers, the glaziers, the painters, they belong to the city too. Their labor is in every wall, every arch, every gleaming surface. You taste something faintly in the air, the ghost of a dinner long finished, roasted meat and wine and something sweet. The remnants of an evening that cost more than most families in this city earn in a year. And yet the building itself stands for everyone to see. From the street below, even the poorest passerby can look up and take in the towers, the carved stone faces above the doorways, the glittering windows. There is something unresolved in that, isn't there? You stand very still in the quiet of this gilded room, listening to the soft creak of the building around you, and you wonder, gently, without judgment, what it means to build something this beautiful, and who it was truly built for. There is a smell that belongs to the upper floors of those grand hotels. It is warm and faintly sweet. Beeswax on polished wood, fresh cut flowers in tall vases. The ghost of expensive perfume left behind in a corridor. You breathe it in slowly, and it feels like the city at its most comfortable with itself. But step outside. Walk just a few blocks in any direction, and the air changes completely. It is heavier out here, thicker. There is coal smoke from tenement stoves, and the sharp smell of horses on cobblestones, and something damp underneath it all. Laundry hanging in narrow courtyards, never quite drying in the grey afternoon light. This is the same city, the same sky above it, but it feels like a different world entirely. And in the 1880s and 1890s, more and more people are beginning to say so out loud. The gap between these two worlds is not invisible. It never really was. But now there are people writing it down, photographing it, knocking on doors in the poorest neighborhoods and asking questions and listening carefully to the answers. They are called reformers or sometimes settlement workers, and they believe that seeing something clearly is the first step toward changing it. You can imagine one of them walking through a crowded tenement block on a winter evening. The light is already gone by 4 o'clock. The streets are loud with children and cartwheels, and someone calling a name from a high window. She pulls her coat a little tighter, not from cold exactly, but from the weight of what she is seeing. Families of 6 or 7 in 2 small rooms, walls that sweat with damp. A single gas lamp shared between 3 households on a landing. She's not there to pity anyone. She is there to understand, and that is a different thing. The settlement houses that open in these years are built on exactly that idea. They are places where educated women and men come to live alongside the communities they want to serve. They offer English classes and childcare and meeting rooms. They offer a warm place to sit, and slowly, carefully, they begin to build something like trust. It is quiet work, unglamorous work, nothing like the glittering lobbies a few streets away. And yet the two worlds are connected in ways that people are only beginning to trace. The wealth in those marble buildings did not appear from nowhere. It was made, in part, by the labor of the very people living in those damp, crowded rooms, the men who laid the railroad tracks, the women who sewed the fine clothes, the children who ran errands before school and sometimes instead of school. You think about that as you walk. The city hums around you. The clatter of a tin cup on a windowsill, the low murmur of a language you don't quite recognize, the smell of something frying in oil that makes your stomach stir with unexpected hunger. Life is happening here, fully, completely, without apology. And that is what the reformers keep trying to say. Not that these neighborhoods are broken, but that the systems around them are. The working hours are too long. The wages are too low. The buildings are too crowded and too poorly built and too profitable for the landlords who own them to ever change on their own. Change, when it comes slowly. A new law here, a small inspection there, a report published that enough people read to feel something shift, just slightly, in the public conversation. It is not enough. Not yet. But it is a beginning. And beginnings, you have learned, often look like almost nothing at all. A woman writing notes by lamplight. A man translating a pamphlet into a language his neighbors can read. A child in a settlement house classroom, sounding out a word for the first time, her finger moving carefully across the page. The city outside is loud and restless and full of itself. The great hotels are still lit up. The elevator bells are still chiming somewhere, carrying well-dressed people toward comfortable rooms. But down here, in the quieter streets, something else is also rising. Slower, less certain, but real. You feel it the way you feel the warmth of a lamp through a window on a cold night. Not dramatic, not sudden, just present, just steady. A small, persistent light in the middle of all that ordinary dark. And that, in its own way, is enough to rest on. The rain has passed, but the cobblestones are still cool and slick beneath your feet. You can feel the dampness through the thin soles of your shoes as you walk. The stones hold the cold a little longer than the air does. That is the way of old things. They keep what they are given. New York in the early years of the new century, feels like a city holding two things at once. One hand grips the past, the tenements, the pushcarts, the long familiar noise of a crowded street. The other hand is reaching forward, reaching towards something it cannot quite name yet. You notice it in small ways at first. There is a new smell in certain parts of the city. Something mineral and electric, something that comes up from underground. You are standing near a grate on the pavement, and a warm breath of air rises up from below, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of iron rails and moving air. The subway is down there, running, alive. It had only just opened a few years before, in 1904, but already it is changing how the city moves. People who once had no reason to travel far from their own neighborhood are now sliding beneath the streets at speeds that would have seemed impossible to their grandparents. You step onto a platform and feel the rush of the train's arrival against your face. Warm, insistent, smelling faintly of grease and electricity. The sound fills the tunnel completely. A low roar that becomes a screech, and then a hiss as the doors open. You step inside. You hold a leather strap overhead. The car sways. Above ground, the city is changing too, though more slowly. There are reformers now, men and women who walk into the crowded wards and tenement halls and say, "This is not good enough. The air in these rooms is not good enough. The water is not clean enough. The children should not be working in factories. They should be in school." Some of these voices have been speaking for years, but something in the air of this new century makes people more willing to listen. You can feel it in the way people talk on street corners. A little more impatient, a little more certain that things can be different. The city passes new laws. Building codes tighten. Inspectors walk through dark hallways with notebooks. Tenement windows that were once sealed against the cold are now required to open. Light must reach inside. Air must move through. It sounds small, but for the families living in those rooms, it is not small at all. You think about a woman hanging laundry on a fire escape in the early morning. The cotton sheets are heavy with water. She lifts them one by one and pins them to the line. The air smells of soap and the river, and something faintly sweet from a bakery 2 floors below. She does not think about reform. She thinks about the sheets drying before the afternoon. But the window behind her is open now, and the light comes in. The city is also building upward. Steel frames rise against the sky. You tilt your head back and watch the upper floors disappear into low cloud. Workers move along narrow beams with a casual ease that makes your stomach tighten just to watch. The city is always asking something of the people who build it. Down on the street, there are motor cars now. Not many, but enough that the horses notice. You can see it in the way a horse pulls sideways, ears back, when one of those rattling machines passes too close. The city smells different because of them too. A faint, sharp smell of engine exhaust, mixing with the older smells of manure and coal smoke and bread. Everything is layering on top of everything else. In Europe, something is beginning to gather. A tension that most people in New York cannot quite feel yet, not directly. It is too far away. The news arrives in newspapers that are folded and read on subway cars, then left on the seat for the next person. Headlines about distant places, names of countries that feel abstract. But the city keeps moving. The subway runs. The buildings rise. The reformers knock on doors. You find yourself standing at the edge of a park as evening comes on. The grass is still wet from the earlier rain. You can smell it, green and clean and alive. A child runs past you, shoes soaking through in seconds, not caring at all. The city is restless. The city is hopeful. The city is about to be tested in ways it does not yet know. For now, though, the grass is wet, and the evening is quiet. There is something on your tongue as the train slows. Something faint. The particular taste of underground air, cool and metallic, like a coin held too long in a closed hand. You notice it without thinking. It is just part of the city now. Part of what it means to move through New York in these early years of the 20th century. The doors open. People step out. People step in. The whole city breathing in and out through these new underground lungs. Above you, the streets are busy in a way that feels different from even a decade before. The city has grown enormous, not just in buildings and bridges, but in something harder to name. An awareness, maybe, a sense that what happens far away, across an ocean, in a country most people here left behind, still matters, still lands, still arrives at the doorstep. And in 1914 it does. The news comes slowly at first. A shooting in Sarajevo, an archduke, a tangle of alliances pulling apart like old rope. Most New Yorkers read the headlines over coffee, folding the paper under one arm, stepping onto a streetcar. It feels distant. It feels like something happening in a world that is not quite theirs. But New York is never quite separate from the world. It never has been. The city is full of people who still have family in Europe. Polish families in Greenpoint. Jewish families on the Lower East Side. Italian families in East Harlem. German families in Yorkville, where the streets smell of bread and sausage, and the voices in the shops shift easily between two languages. For all of them, the war in Europe is not abstract. It is a letter that does not arrive. It is a name in a newspaper that makes your stomach drop. It is a brother, a cousin, a father, somewhere in the mud and smoke of a continent that feels suddenly very close. You can feel the tension in the city's fabric, a kind of tightening. Neighbors who once shared a stoop now look at each other with something careful in their eyes. German Americans, who have built so much of this city, its breweries, its music halls, its churches, begin to feel a new and uncomfortable attention. The warmth that was always there becomes something they have to work a little harder to show. The harbor stays busy. Ships still come and go. But the water feels different now, heavier somehow. In May of 1915, the Lusitania is sunk by a German submarine off the coast of Ireland. Nearly 1,200 people die. Almost 130 of them are American. The news hits New York like a cold wave. People stand on street corners and read the extras being sold by boys with ink-stained hands. The city goes quiet in a way that is not peaceful. Still, America does not enter the war. Not yet. Woodrow Wilson wins re-election in 1916 on the quiet promise of keeping the country out of it. New York watches. New York waits. But in April of 1917, the waiting ends. The city does not erupt. It does not go wild in the streets. There is something more complicated than celebration. Men register for the draft at local boards set up in schools and armories. You can imagine the smell of those rooms. Chalk dust, floor wax, the faint sweat of men sitting in rows, filling out forms in careful handwriting. Young men from every neighborhood, from the tenements and the brownstones, from the docks and the offices, from families who came here to build something new and now find themselves reaching back toward the old world after all. The city organizes. Liberty Bond drives fill Madison Square Garden. Women roll bandages in church halls. Factories shift what they make. The whole enormous machine of New York turns, slowly, towards something it has never quite faced before. And yet the city keeps going. The subway still runs. The pushcarts still line Orchard Street. Children still play in the spray of open fire hydrants on hot afternoons. Life continues in all its small and ordinary beauty, even as something enormous gathers at the edges of it. That is what you feel, sitting with all of this. The weight of a world that has arrived at the city's door, and the quiet, stubborn way the city keeps answering, keeps opening, keeps moving, keeps holding all of it together. The train moves on through the dark tunnel. The strap sways gently above you. And somewhere up ahead, the light of the next station begins to grow. The sound reaches you before anything else. It comes drifting across the evening air, low and warm, like something half remembered from a dream. A trumpet, then a piano, tumbling after it, then a whole tangle of rhythm and brass, and something you can't quite name, something that makes your feet feel lighter than they did a moment ago. You are still sitting at that little dockside table. The coffee cup is cool in your hands now. The harbor has gone quiet for the night, the last of the day's workers heading home along the waterfront. But this sound, this music, it's pulling you in a different direction entirely. You follow it. The city in 1919 is tired in some ways and electric in others. The war is finally over. There is a strange new feeling in the streets, something restless and giddy and a little unsteady, like a person who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has only just remembered how to exhale. People want to move. They want to laugh. They want to be loud after so many years of being afraid. And the music is right there waiting for them. You turn down a side street, and the sound gets richer. You can feel it now, a faint vibration in the soles of your shoes, rising up through the pavement. The bass notes from somewhere inside a building, thick and steady, like a heartbeat the whole block shares. The door to a small club is propped open with a wooden chair. Warm yellow light spills out onto the cobblestones. The smell of cigarette smoke and something sweeter, maybe pomade, maybe perfume, drifts past you on the night air. Inside, the room is close and full. People are pressed together at small round tables. Some are dancing in whatever space they can find. A woman in a beaded dress laughs at something her companion says, and the sound of her laughter blends right into the music, like it belongs there. This is jazz. It has been traveling for years, moving up from New Orleans, from Memphis, from Chicago, spreading through cities like a warm wind that nobody planned and nobody could stop. It carries something in it, a looseness, a conversation between musicians, a sense that the rules are suggestions and the real music lives in the spaces between the notes. The trumpet player closes his eyes when he plays. His whole body leans into it. The pianist watches him with a small smile, following, responding, the two of them talking to each other in a language that doesn't need words. You find a spot near the wall and just listen. The decade ahead, these 10 years that people will one day call the Roaring Twenties, is going to be unlike anything the city has seen before. New technologies are arriving. The radio, the gramophone, moving pictures with more spectacle than anyone imagined possible. Money is moving faster. Fashions are changing faster. Young women are cutting their hair short and wearing shorter skirts and dancing in ways that make the older generation press their lips together and say nothing or say too much. There is a new kind of freedom in the air, imperfect and uneven. Not everyone feels it equally, and the city still carries all its old divisions and injustices close to its chest. But something has shifted. Something is different. And the music is the sound of that difference. A man near you taps his fingers on the table, without realizing he's doing it. Couple sways gently in the corner, their eyes half closed. Even the bartender, wiping down the counter with a slow cloth, moves his shoulders a little, just slightly, in time with the rhythm. You breathe in the warm, smoky air. You let the trumpet wash over you. You feel the bass in your ribs. Outside, the city is changing its clothes, getting ready for a decade of noise and color and speed. Automobiles are multiplying in the streets. New buildings are reaching upward. Advertisements are growing bolder and brighter. Everything seems to be leaning forward, eager, a little breathless. But in here, in this small room with its yellow light and its close warmth, time moves differently. The music stretches it out, makes it soft, makes it generous. The trumpet player opens his eyes for just a moment. He looks out at the room. He smiles. And then he closes his eyes again and plays on. You stay a little longer. The night is young. The decade is younger still. And somewhere in the music, something is just beginning. The light changes first. You notice it before anything else. The way the morning sun catches the upper floors of a new building going up on the corner, white stone and pale terracotta, still wrapped in scaffolding, still becoming what it wants to be. The workers are already up there, tiny figures moving carefully against the sky, and the light hits the stone in a way that makes it glow, almost warm, like something alive. It is 1924, and the city is reaching upward. You stand on the pavement below and tilt your head back. The building above you has details you have to look for, small geometric carvings near the roofline, chevron patterns pressed into the stone, sunburst shapes framing the windows. None of it is accidental. Someone drew every line of this. Someone decided that a building should not just stand. It should say something. That is the feeling of this decade, that everything should say something. The air smells of stone dust and motor oil. A delivery truck rumbles past, close enough that you feel the vibration in your chest. The driver does not look up. He has somewhere to be. Everyone has somewhere to be now. The city has a new tempo, and it is faster than before. You walk a little further along the street. There is a new hotel going up 2 blocks east. You have watched it rise over the past several months, floor by floor, the steel skeleton first, then the concrete, then the cladding that gives it its face. The architects have chosen a style that is becoming familiar now. Clean lines, bold geometry, ornament that feels modern rather than ancient. Not the heavy columns of an older era. Something lighter. Something that believes in the future. Art Deco, some people call it, though most people on the street just call it new. Just call it beautiful. You step into a small cafe nearby and order a coffee. The cup is warm in your hands. The interior here has caught the same spirit. The counter edged with a zigzag pattern in black and gold tile. The light fixtures shaped like stylized flowers. The whole room feeling both elegant and somehow efficient. As if beauty and usefulness have finally agreed to get along. The coffee is strong and slightly bitter. You wrap both hands around the cup. At the table beside you, 2 men are talking over blueprints. You catch fragments. A new tower. Setbacks required by the zoning laws, which means the building will step back as it rises, like a wedding cake, like a mountain, like something trying to be polite about how tall it wants to be. One of the men traces a line on the paper with his finger. The other nods slowly. Outside the window, a tram slides past. Then a woman in a cloche hat, walking quickly, her heels tapping a neat rhythm on the pavement. Then a boy selling newspapers, his voice a bright thread cutting through the low rumble of the street. The city is full of sound right now, full of motion, but there is also something underneath all of it, a kind of confidence that is almost tender, because the people building these towers, designing these facades, pressing these sunburst patterns into stone, they believe something. They believe that the city is going somewhere good, that the future is a place worth decorating, worth arriving at in style. You finish your coffee, you leave a coin on the table, and step back out into the morning. The scaffolding on the corner building creaks gently in the breeze. A worker calls something down to someone below, and the sound carries easily in the cool air. High above, a flag on a completed building nearby snaps and settles, snaps and settles. You look up again at those geometric carvings near the roofline, the chevrons, the small repeated diamonds, the way the stone catches light differently depending on the angle. Someone made those by hand. Someone climbed up there, cold fingers and careful tools, and pressed meaning into the surface of a building that most people will only ever glance at from below, will only ever half notice, the way you half notice things that have always been there. But they will be there. Long after the scaffolding comes down, long after the decade ends, in whatever way it ends, the stone will hold the pattern. The pattern will hold the light. And the city, for now, keeps reaching, quietly, steadily, one careful floor at a time, toward a sky that seems, on a morning like this, entirely willing to be met. The smell comes first, something stale and cold, like a room that has been closed up for too long, like the warmth has simply left, and no one has thought to open a window. You notice it on the streets, that particular absence of bread baking, of coffee brewing, of the small everyday smells that used to drift out of doorways in the morning. The city still stands, the buildings are still there, but something has gone quiet inside them. It is 1929, and the autumn has arrived with an unusual stillness. The neon signs that used to glow all night have been dimming earlier and earlier. The last few people who wandered home at dawn have disappeared now. The streets are not empty exactly, but they feel emptier than they should. You stand on a corner and watch a man in a good coat walk past. His coat is clean, his shoes are polished, but there is something careful in the way he moves, something held in, like he is trying not to take up too much space. That is the feeling that settles over the city in these years. A careful, held-in feeling. The news comes in waves, first from far away, from the stock exchanges, from the banks, from the newspapers with their heavy black headlines. Then closer, then right here on this street, in this neighborhood, in the shop that used to have its lights on. You walk past a bakery that is closed now. The window is dusty. There is a faded paper sign behind the glass, but you can't quite read it anymore. You press your fingers lightly against the cold glass and feel how still everything is inside. The depression does not arrive like a storm. It arrives like a slow chill, like the temperature dropping 1 degree at a time until you realize you are very, very cold. Families double up. A brother moves in with a sister. A grandmother comes to stay. Rooms that used to hold one person now hold 4. You can hear it sometimes, walking past apartment buildings, the low murmur of too many voices in a small space. Not unhappy, exactly. Just close. Just crowded with the particular intimacy of people who have no other choice. The soup kitchen's open. You might pass one in the early morning, when the line is already long. The smell of thin broth drifts out onto the pavement. It is not an unpleasant smell. It is warm, at least. It is something. The people in the line stand quietly. Some of them are wearing their best clothes, because even now, even here, dignity matters. A man near the front has a hat tilted just so. A woman has pinned a small brooch to her coat. You notice these small details. The way people hold onto the things that make them feel like themselves. The city's parks fill up in ways they never did before. Men sit on benches in the middle of the day, not resting, not reading, just sitting, waiting for something to change, for some news, for a job that might appear. The pigeons walk around their feet, unbothered. The trees drop their leaves slowly, one by one. Children still play. That is one of the things you notice. Even in the hardest years, children find ways to play. A bottle cap becomes a game piece. A stretch of pavement becomes a whole world. You hear their voices from somewhere down the block, high and quick and completely present in the moment, the way children always are. The radio becomes important in a new way. Families gather close to it in the evenings. The sound is a little tinny, a little crackling, but it fills the room. It connects people to something larger than their own four walls. A voice from far away, steady and calm, telling them they are not alone in this. And the city itself, the streets, the buildings, the old stone and brick of it, holds on. Cities are patient things. They have held harder times than this. They carry the weight of years in their walls, in the worn smoothness of their steps, in the way the light falls at a certain angle on a certain afternoon and makes everything look, just for a moment, like it might be all right. You sit down on a bench near a fountain that is no longer running. The basin is dry. A few leaves have gathered at the bottom. You rest your hands in your lap and breathe slowly. The city breathes with you, quietly, waiting. You pull your coat a little tighter. The fabric is thin, worn soft from too many winters, and it doesn't hold the warmth the way it once did, but you hold it close anyway. That small act, fingers gripping the lapels, pulling the collar up around your ears, feels like something. It feels like trying. And in the early 1930s, trying is what most people in this city are doing every single day. The soup kitchen smell is still with you, that warm, starchy drift of broth and bread. It followed you down the block and around the corner, and somehow it doesn't feel sad. It feels like people. It feels like the city refusing to let its own go hungry without a fight. Because that is what you notice. If you walk slowly enough and pay attention, the city is not giving up. There are men on scaffolding. You can hear them before you see them. The steady knock of hammers, the scrape of metal on stone, the low call of voices coordinating across a work site. These are New Deal workers, employed by federal programs that arrived in the early years of the decade. Programs designed to put hands to work and keep families from falling completely apart. You stop and watch for a moment. The air is cold and sharp against your cheeks. Your breath makes small clouds, but the workers move with a kind of steady purpose that warms something in your chest. They are building a post office, or repairing a bridge, or laying new sidewalks along a street that has been crumbling since before the crash. The work is real. The wages are modest, but they are wages, and that matters more than you can easily put into words. The New Deal programs reach into the city in many ways during these years. The Works Progress Administration, the WPA, puts people to work not just with hammers and shovels, but with paintbrushes and typewriters. Artists are commissioned to paint murals in public buildings. Writers document the stories of ordinary people. Musicians perform in parks and community halls. The idea is simple and quietly radical. Art is not a luxury. It belongs to everyone. Even now, especially now. You walk past a library, and glance through the tall windows. Inside, the reading room is full. People sit at long wooden tables, heads bent over newspapers and books. The light is golden and still. A child traces a finger along a page. An older man writes something carefully in a small notebook. The library is warm and free and open, and on a hard day, that means everything. Outside, you can smell coffee from a diner across the street. Just the thread of it, dark and bitter and real. Someone in there is having a hot cup of something. That small comfort feels enormous right now. You think about going in. Maybe you will. The 1930s are not easy years. You know that. Unemployment stays stubbornly high for most of the decade. Families double up in apartments. Children wear shoes that don't quite fit. There is a weariness that settles into people's faces. A kind of patience that comes not from peace but from necessity. And yet, neighbors share what they have. Church halls fill on cold evenings. Community gardens appear in vacant lots, small patches of earth turned over by careful hands, planted with whatever seeds can be found. The soil is dark and cool between your fingers if you kneel down and touch it. Someone has been here recently. Someone is tending this. That is the texture of this decade, if you let yourself feel it. Not just hardship, not just loss, but the particular warmth of people leaning toward each other when things get hard. The city is teaching itself something during these years. Something about what it is made of. Something about who shows up. By the end of the 1930s, the worst is beginning to lift. Slowly, unevenly, but the scaffolding is coming down on buildings that have been repaired and made new. The murals on the post office walls are finished, bright, steady images of workers and families and the life of the city, painted there for everyone who walks through the door. You stand in front of one of them for a moment. The colors are warm. The figures are ordinary people doing ordinary things. And somehow, that is exactly right. You breathe in. The air is a little softer now, a little less sharp. The city made it through. Not easily. Not without cost, but it made it through. And it carries the memory of that in its walls, and its sidewalks, and the quiet pride of the people who walk them. There is something metallic on the back of your tongue tonight. Faint, like a coin held too long in a warm hand. You notice it as you breathe in the evening air, standing near the river. It is not unpleasant exactly. It is just there. A reminder that the air itself has changed. The city has changed. It happened gradually, and then all at once. The way seasons do. The way sleep does. One morning you simply woke up, and everything was moving faster than it had been before. It is 1941 now. And then it is 1942, and the city is humming in a way it never quite hummed before. Not the slow, uncertain hum of recovery you remember from the harder years. This is something else. This is purposeful. This is loud and warm and relentless. The factories are running through the night. You can hear them if you stand still long enough. A low, steady vibration that travels up through the soles of your shoes, through the pavement, through the bones of the city itself. The sound is not frightening. It is almost reassuring. Like a heartbeat that has found its rhythm again. You walk toward the industrial edge of the city, where the buildings are wide and low, lit from inside with a pale orange glow. The windows are tall and dirty, and the light spills out in long rectangles across the ground. You can smell the heat from here. Hot metal, machine oil, something sharp and clean underneath it all, like the smell just before rain. The doors of the plant are open to let in the night air. You step closer and look inside. The floor is enormous, bigger than you expected. And it is full of people. Women in headscarves and overalls. Men with rolled sleeves. Young faces and older ones. People who were waitresses last year, or school teachers, or who had never set foot inside a factory in their lives. They are standing at machines now. They are learning the language of metal and pressure and precision. They are building things that will cross oceans. You watch a woman guide a piece of steel into place with steady, careful hands. Her face is focused. She does not look up. She is somewhere deep inside the work, and the work is holding her completely. There is a kind of pride in the air here. You can almost taste it, mixed in with the metal and the oil. Something warm and collective. Something that belongs to everyone in this room equally. Outside, the city has rearranged itself around this new purpose. Victory gardens have appeared in backyards and empty lots, small, tidy rows of vegetables pushing up through the dark soil. You walk past one in the early morning sometimes, and you can smell the earth turned fresh. The green smell of bean plants and tomato leaves in the cool air. Neighbors lean over fences and talk about what is coming up, what needs more water, what the rabbits got to last night. There are posters on the walls of shops and bus shelters. Bold colors, simple words. They ask things of you. They remind you that the effort is shared, that every small thing counts. Ration books sit on kitchen tables across the city. Thin little booklets, soft at the corners from being handled. Sugar is measured carefully now. Butter, meat. You learn to taste the difference in things. You learn to be grateful for what is there, and not to think too hard about what is not. The children collect scrap metal from the alleys, and drag it to collection points in little red wagons. The sound of metal clanging against metal follows them down the street. They are serious about it. They understand, in the way children sometimes do, that they are part of something. At night, the city dims itself. Not completely dark, but quieter with light than it used to be. The neon signs that once blazed along the main streets are turned low. The windows of houses show only thin lines of brightness at the edges of curtains. The city is still here. It is just being careful. You sit on a front step in the warm evening and listen to the factory hum carrying across the rooftops. Somewhere down the block someone is playing a radio softly, a song you half know. The melody drifts out through a screen door and dissolves into the night air. The city is working. Every part of it, every hand, every garden, every careful spoonful of rationed sugar stirred into a cup of tea. And somewhere across the water, all of this is becoming something else entirely. You breathe in the night air and hold the thought gently, like something you are not quite ready to put down. The sound reaches you before anything else. It starts low, somewhere across the rooftops. A murmur, almost like wind. But then it grows. Voices, hundreds of them, then thousands, spilling out of doorways and down stairwells and into the streets below. You hear it through the factory walls first, a distant rumble that makes the window panes tremble just slightly in their frames. Someone near you sets down their tin mug. Someone else looks up from their work. And then, without anyone saying a word, everyone simply knows. The war is over. That sound, that wave of human voices rising all at once, is something you will carry for the rest of your life. It doesn't sound like celebration at first. It sounds more like relief, like a breath the whole city has been holding for years, finally, gently, let go. You step outside into the afternoon light. The air is cool against your face, sharper than you expected. There's still the faint smell of machine oil on your hands, and the last trace of that rationed chocolate. thin and slightly waxy, still lingers at the back of your throat. But now the street smells different too. Someone nearby has opened a window, and the scent of something warm drifts down. Bread, maybe? Or soup. Something simple and nourishing. Something that says, we can think about tomorrow again. People are moving toward the main square. Not running. Walking, but with purpose. Shoulders that have been drawn tight for so long are beginning to drop. You notice it on the faces around you. Not quite smiling yet, not fully. Something more complicated than a smile. Something softer. Eyes that are bright and a little wet at the edges. You fall into step with the crowd. The cobblestones are uneven beneath your feet, worn smooth in the middle from years of footsteps just like yours. You can feel every small ridge and hollow through the thin soles of your shoes. The city has not changed. The same narrow lanes, the same worn facades, the same lamppost on the corner that has always leaned slightly to the left. And yet everything feels different. The light seems to sit differently on the buildings, warmer somehow, less cautious. In the square, people are gathering in loose clusters. An older man near the fountain is crying quietly, his cap held in both hands against his chest. A group of young women link arms and sway together, not quite dancing, just leaning into one another. Children weave between the adults, not entirely sure what is happening, but feeling the electricity of it, laughing simply because the grown-ups around them seem lighter. Then the soldiers begin to come home, not all at once, not in a grand parade. They arrive in small groups, some still in uniform, some already changed into civilian clothes that hang a little loose. They walk with a particular kind of tiredness, deep in the bones, not the kind that sleep fixes easily. But they are here. They are walking through the gate and into the square and into the arms of people who have been counting the days. You watch a woman take her husband's face in both hands. She doesn't speak. She just looks at him for a long moment, as if she needs to make sure he is real. He closes his eyes. She rests her forehead against his. The crowd around them keeps moving, keeps murmuring, keeps living, but that small moment holds still inside it, like a stone in a stream. Someone nearby passes around a small bottle of something. You take a sip when it reaches you. It's sharp and sweet at the same time, homemade, probably, and it burns warmly all the way down. People laugh. Someone begins to sing, an old song, one that everyone seems to know the words to without thinking. Other voices join in, one by one, until the square is full of it. The afternoon light begins to soften toward evening. The shadows stretch long and golden across the square. The singing continues, quieter now, more tender. The city is still the same city. The same stones, the same streets, the same river running somewhere just beyond the rooftops. But something has shifted in the air. Something that had been clenched for so long has finally opened. You stand in the square as the first stars appear above the chimneys. The voices around you are gentle now, murmuring, settling. The city breathes slowly, and for the first time in a very long time, the night ahead feels like rest. The last of the ticker tape is still drifting. You watch it settle, thin white curls catching the late afternoon light, landing softly on shoulders, on windowsills, on the warm pavement. The crowds are thinning now. The cheering has faded into something quieter. A hum, a collective exhale, and in that stillness, you can feel it, something shifting, something new beginning to take shape. The city is alive in a different way now. For years, this place held its breath, rationed its sugar and its rubber and its grief, sent its young men away, and watched its women step into factories, into offices, into roles that had never quite fit them before, and found, quietly, that they fit perfectly well. The city learned things about itself during those years. Hard things, surprising things, and now the war is over, and the city wants to celebrate. But more than that, it wants to build. You walk through the downtown streets in the late 1940s, and you notice the windows of the department stores are full again. Bolts of fabric in colors that feel almost extravagant after years of gray and brown. Nylon stockings, electric appliances with rounded edges and cheerful chrome trim. A toaster that gleams like a small promise. You press your hand against the cool glass and look in, and something in your chest loosens just a little. There is money moving through the city now. Not for everyone. Not yet. Not equally. But you can feel the current of it. New cars rolling off lots. New businesses opening on side streets. The smell of fresh paint drifting out of a storefront was empty just last month. The men are coming home. Some of them are quiet in ways they weren't before. Some of them carry things they don't have words for yet. But many of them are ready, hungry, even, for ordinary life. For a front door with their name on it. For a yard, for somewhere to put down roots. And the city is ready to give that to them. You hear it first in the conversations at the diner counter. Someone's cousin just bought a lot out past the old farmland. Someone's brother is building a house, 3 bedrooms, a garage, a patch of lawn. The coffee is hot and a little bitter, and the man beside you wraps both hands around his mug and says quietly that he never thought he'd have something like that, something of his own. The suburbs are growing. You can see it happening if you drive out past the city's old edges. Where there were fields, there are now streets laid out in careful grids. Where there were trees, there are foundations being poured. The sound of hammering carries on the morning air, steady, rhythmic, almost musical. Whole neighborhoods rising up out of the earth like something dreamed and then decided upon. The federal government is helping. Loans for veterans, highways being planned and funded, roads reaching outward from the city's heart like spokes on a wheel, making it possible to live further away and still get to work. The city is stretching, spreading, becoming something larger than it was. Inside those new houses, the kitchens smell of linoleum and fresh plaster. Young families are moving in with almost nothing and slowly filling the rooms. A second-hand sofa, a radio on the kitchen counter, a baby in a crib that still smells of sawdust. There is something tender about it, this careful, hopeful assembling of a life. The schools are filling up. You can hear children in the afternoons, spilling out of buildings onto new playgrounds, their voices high and bright in the open air. A whole generation arriving at once, needing classrooms and teachers and libraries and parks. The city is scrambling to keep up, and it knows it, and it doesn't quite mind. Back in the old neighborhoods closer to the center, things are changing too, though more slowly, and not always in ways that feel like growth. Some of the storefronts that used to bustle are a little quieter now. Some of the families who used to live above the shops have moved out to those new streets beyond the edge of things. The city is pulling in 2 directions at once, and it doesn't yet know what that will mean. But tonight, you don't think about that. Tonight you walk home through streets still faintly littered with paper. The sky is a deep, soft blue. A radio plays somewhere above you, a slow, warm song drifting down from an open window. And the city, for just this moment, feels full of something it hasn't felt in a very long time. The air smells of fresh paint and new carpet. It is a particular kind of smell, clean and a little sharp, the way a room feels when it has just been made ready for something important. You notice it as you imagine yourself walking through the corridors of the new United Nations building, rising along the East River in Midtown Manhattan. The paint is barely dry. The floors are still being polished, and yet people are already arriving from every corner of the world, carrying briefcases, speaking softly in languages you half recognize. This is New York in the late 1940s and into the 1950s. And something has shifted in the city's sense of itself. You step outside for a moment. The river is right there, grey and quiet in the morning light. A tugboat moves slowly upstream, leaving a small white wake behind it. The United Nations headquarters is still being completed, but the work of the organization has already begun. Delegates have been meeting in temporary spaces, in a converted gymnasium on Long Island, in a building in Lake Success. The city has been hosting this great experiment in international cooperation, even before it had a permanent home for it. And there is something tender about that, if you think about it. The world trying to talk to itself, finding borrowed rooms, making do. By 1952, the permanent headquarters on First Avenue is open. You can stand on the sidewalk and look up at the tall glass slab of the Secretariat building. It catches the light differently at different hours. In the morning, it is silver. In the afternoon, it goes almost blue. It does not look like anything else in the city. It was not meant to. It was meant to look like a new idea. Inside, the rooms are filled with the sound of simultaneous translation, voices murmuring through headphones in French, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, English. You can almost hear it if you close your eyes. That soft, layered hum of the world trying to understand itself. New York absorbs all of this quietly. The city has always been a place where people arrive from somewhere else, but now it is also a place where the world officially gathers. Diplomats take apartments on the Upper East Side. Small restaurants begin serving food you could not easily find before. Dishes with unfamiliar spices, breads baked in ways that are new to the neighborhood. The smell of cardamom drifts from one doorway. Somewhere nearby, coffee is being made very strong and very sweet. The city is changing its texture, slowly, one small thing at a time. And back in those living rooms you were imagining, the ones with the television screens glowing softly in the windows, people are watching all of this unfold. The news comes into the home now, in a way it never quite did before. You can see the faces of the delegates. You can watch the General Assembly in session. The world feels closer, and also somehow more manageable, when you can see it in a box of light on your own shelf. There is a particular kind of optimism that belongs to this period. It is not loud. It does not shout. It is more like a quiet confidence, the feeling that things are being built, that problems can be solved if enough people sit down together and try. New York carries this feeling in its bones during these years. The skyline is still growing. The subways are full. The streets smell of roasted nuts from the corner carts, of exhaust and rain-wet pavement, of the city doing what it always does, which is simply continuing. You think about all the people who passed through those UN corridors in those early years. People who had survived terrible things. People who had crossed oceans and borders and losses that are hard to imagine. And yet here they were, in this city, in these new rooms, trying to find a common language. There is something quietly brave about that. The East River keeps moving past the glass building, the same as it always has. The tugboats go about their work. The light changes on the water through the afternoon, and the city holds all of it, the diplomats and the deli counters, the headphone translations and the corner newsstands, the television glow and the smell of fresh paint, holds it all the way a city does, without fuss, without ceremony. Just by continuing to be itself and making a little room for something new. The paper is still warm in your hands. Not from the sun exactly, though the light is soft and golden through the tall windows. It is warm, the way important things sometimes feel warm, like the world has been holding its breath. And now, slowly, it is beginning to let go. You set the document down on the edge of a wide desk. The ink has dried. The words are fixed now. And somewhere outside, the city is already moving on, already becoming something new, already asking questions that no diplomat's signature can fully answer. You step outside. The street meets you immediately. The smell of it first. Exhaust and bread from a bakery 2 doors down. And something underneath all of that, something harder to name. A kind of energy, a restlessness that has been building for years, quiet and patient, and is now beginning to rise. It is the early 1960s. Cairo is a city of nearly 4 million people. It is growing faster than anyone quite planned for. New apartment blocks have gone up on the edges of old neighborhoods, their concrete still pale and rough against the older stone. Narrow lanes that have wound through the same paths for centuries now carry cars and motorcycles and donkey carts all at once, all pressing forward, all going somewhere. You walk a little way down the street. A group of young men stand near a wall. They are talking quickly, gesturing. You cannot hear the words clearly, but you can feel the shape of the conversation. It has that particular weight, that particular lean-forward quality of people who are trying to figure something out, something that matters. Across the Arab world and beyond, the 1960s are a decade of questions. Who should lead? Who should benefit? What does independence actually mean when the schools are still overcrowded, and the rents are still too high, and the jobs are still too few? In Cairo, those questions have a texture you can almost touch. You reach out and let your fingers brush the wall beside you. The plaster is rough and warm from the afternoon sun. Someone has written something on it in chalk, but the words have smudged. You can only make out the shape of letters, not the meaning. It feels like a metaphor for something, though you are too tired to say exactly what. The city is changing. You can feel it in the way people move through the streets, a little faster, a little more alert. There is something simmering, not violence exactly, not yet, not here on this particular corner, but awareness. A collective sense that the way things are is not quite the way things have to be. Gamal Abdel Nasser has been president since the mid-1950s. His voice comes through radios in coffee shops and from windows left open in the heat. His vision of Arab socialism, of national pride, of Egypt standing tall among nations, it has real warmth for many people. You can hear it in how they speak his name. Quietly proud, carefully hopeful. But the city is complicated. It always has been. The housing is not keeping pace with the people arriving every year from the countryside, drawn by the idea of Cairo, by the possibility of it. Informal neighborhoods have grown up on the edges of the city, and inside the old quarters too, places where the streets are too narrow for the census taker to easily find you, where water comes from a shared tap in the courtyard, where children do their homework by the light that comes in from the alley. You pass a courtyard now. A woman is hanging laundry from a line strung between 2 windows. The sheets billow slowly in the warm air. A small boy sits on a step, watching you with calm, curious eyes. A radio somewhere is playing something slow and sweet, one of those songs that seems to exist outside of time, that could belong to any decade, any afternoon. You stop for a moment. The smell of cumin drifts out from somewhere nearby. Someone is cooking. The day is winding toward evening, and the light is going golden and long across the rooftops. You think about the document you held earlier, the warm ink, the careful words, And you think about this courtyard, this boy, this song. History is not only made in chambers with tall windows, it is also made here, in the small decisions of ordinary days, in the questions that people carry quietly inside them as they hang the laundry and cook the dinner and watch the street. The city is holding something. You can feel it. You are not quite sure yet what it is. The taste in the air is sharp that evening, a little like metal, a little like exhaust, the kind of taste that settles on the back of your tongue when a city is running on fumes and everyone knows it. You are standing near that lamppost. The protest sign is still leaning there, hand-painted letters fading a little in the dim light. Someone made that sign at a kitchen table. Someone dipped a brush and wrote those words carefully because they believed it mattered. And maybe it does. But tonight the city feels very tired. New York in 1975 is a city that has been spending more than it earns for a long, long time. And now the bill has come due. The numbers are staggering, but you don't need to know every figure to feel the weight of them. The city owes money it simply does not have. Banks are nervous. The state is nervous. Washington is nervous. And ordinary New Yorkers, the ones who ride the subway and send their children to public schools and call the fire department when something goes wrong, they are the ones who feel it most. You walk a little further down the block. The streetlights are on, but some of them flicker. The sidewalk beneath your feet is cracked in places, heaved up by old tree roots that nobody has come to fix. Small things, but they add up. They tell a story. A diner on the corner is still open. You can smell it from here. Coffee, old grease, something sweet from the pie case near the window. You push open the door and the warmth wraps around you like a warm coat. The kind of warmth that isn't elegant, but it's real. The man behind the counter has his radio on low. A voice is talking about the city's finances, about layoffs, about cutbacks, about what happens if the money runs out entirely. The man wipes down the counter without looking up. He has heard this before. He will hear it again. Tens of thousands of city workers have already lost their jobs this year. Firefighters, sanitation workers, teachers, police officers. The city has been cutting and cutting, trying to find a way through. And still it isn't enough. You wrap both hands around a mug of coffee. It's a little too hot, but you hold it anyway. The warmth travels through your palms and up your wrists, and it feels like something solid in an uncertain moment. Outside, a garbage truck rumbles past, slower than it used to be. Fewer routes now. You can see it through the diner window, orange light blinking, moving through the dark street like something weary. There is a word people use for this period. They call it the fiscal crisis. But that phrase is almost too clean for what it actually feels like. What it actually feels like is a slow unraveling. A city that built itself into something enormous, something ambitious, something full of promise, and then found itself unable to pay for any of it. The subways are older now. The parks are rougher. The schools are stretched thin. And yet people are still here. That is the thing that stays with you. They are still here. The woman at the end of the counter is reading a newspaper. She turns a page quietly. A couple near the window are sharing a plate of fries, talking in low voices, laughing softly at something private. The cook in the back is humming to himself, just barely audible over the hiss of the grill. The city is in crisis. That is true, but it is also still breathing, still moving, still full of small, ordinary moments that no budget shortfall can entirely take away. You think about the protest sign back on the lamppost. Someone left it there on purpose. A small act of insistence. A way of saying, We are still here, and we still care what happens to this place. New York has been called ungovernable. It has been told, in so many words, to drop dead. And yet here it is, dented and exhausted and behind on its bills. But here, the coffee has cooled just enough to drink now. You take a slow sip. It's bitter and a little burnt, and somehow exactly right for the evening. Outside, the city hums on, quietly, stubbornly, the way it always has. And somewhere in that hum, underneath the worry and the weariness, there is something that has not yet given up. Something that is still, even now, holding on. That coffee is still on your tongue, bitter and warm. And now, slowly, something else reaches you through the quiet of the night. Music. It drifts in from somewhere down the block. Not loud, just enough to find you. A low, steady pulse, synthesizers and drums. The kind of sound that doesn't ask anything of you. It just moves. It breathes. And somehow, in this city that has been so tired for so long, it feels like something waking up. You sit with it for a moment. Let it settle around you like the steam still rising from your cup. New York in 1980 is not a beautiful city. Not yet. The streets are rough. The buildings are worn. There are whole neighborhoods where the lights have gone dark and stayed dark. But there is something else here too. Something harder to name. A kind of energy that lives underneath the damage. A stubbornness. A refusal. You step outside. The night air is cool against your face. A little sharp. You can smell the city the way you always can. Exhaust and concrete, and something faintly sweet from a bakery somewhere nearby, already starting its early morning work. The pavement is uneven under your feet, cracked in places, but you walk anyway. A few blocks away, light spills from a doorway. Not the harsh fluorescent light of a diner or a laundromat. Something warmer, colored. You hear voices, laughter, the shuffle of feet. A club, maybe, or a gallery, or something in between. Because in this city, in this decade, those lines are beginning to blur. Inside, the walls are covered in paintings. Big, bold, restless paintings. Colors that don't apologize. Letters and shapes that look like they were made fast, made urgent, made by someone who needed to say something right now. You recognize this feeling, even if you can't name the artist. This is the energy of people who grew up in a broken city and decided to make something beautiful from the pieces. The music is louder in here. That same pulse, but fuller now. You feel it in your chest, just slightly. Not uncomfortable, more like a reminder that you have a heartbeat. This is what the 1980s are beginning to feel like in New York. Not a clean recovery, not a sudden brightness, more like embers catching, slowly, unevenly, but catching. The city has been through its darkest years, the near bankruptcy of the mid-70s, the fires in the Bronx, the sense that New York was simply too broken to fix. But money is beginning to move again, carefully at first. Then with more confidence, real estate developers are looking at neighborhoods that nobody looked at before. Offices are filling up. Wall Street is stirring in ways that will soon become impossible to ignore. But that is not what you feel tonight. Tonight, what you feel is smaller and more human than economics. You feel the warmth of a room full of people who are making things. A young woman near the back is sketching something in a notebook, her pen moving quickly. Two men are talking close together, gesturing at a canvas, disagreeing about something with great affection. Someone hands you a small plastic cup of red wine. It is not very good wine. but it is given freely, and that matters. You sip it slowly. Let the thin, slightly sour taste sit on your tongue. Around you, the conversation is a comfortable blur. You catch words here and there. A gallery opening uptown. A new record. A building on the Lower East Side that someone is turning into studios. The city is not saved. You know that. There are still streets you would not walk alone at night. There are still families struggling in ways that no amount of gallery openings can touch. The recovery, when it comes, will not reach everyone equally. That is a truth worth holding. But tonight, in this warm room with its loud paintings, and its thin wine, and its steady breathing music, something feels possible. Not certain, just possible. And that is enough for now. You lean against the wall. The plaster is cool through your jacket. You close your eyes for just a moment and let the music move through you. That low pulse. Those synthesizers. The sound of a city that is not giving up. Outside, the night is still long. The streets are still rough. But somewhere in the distance, a light is on that wasn't on before. You notice it, and you wonder. The light comes first. You notice it before anything else. A pale gold glow spreading across the lower Manhattan skyline, catching the glass faces of buildings that weren't there just a few years ago. The towers seem to lean slightly toward the morning, as if they too are eager for what the day might bring. It is early. The streets below are not yet crowded, but they are already awake. This is New York in the 1980s, and the city is changing its shape. You stand somewhere near the tip of the island and just look. The World Trade Center towers rise above everything, of course. They have been here since the 70s, patient and enormous. But around them now, new buildings are climbing. Glass and steel and polished granite. Reflective surfaces that catch the clouds and hold them. The skyline is not finished. It never is. But right now it feels particularly alive, particularly restless, as if the city is building itself back up from something it had almost lost. And it had almost lost something. Not long ago, the streets down here felt emptier. The city had been close to bankruptcy in the mid-70s. People had left. Businesses had gone quiet. The word crisis had hung over New York like a low ceiling. But now that ceiling is lifting. You can feel it in the air. Something lighter. Something faster. Wall Street is at the center of it. You walk toward it now, and the streets narrow as they always do in this old part of the city. These lanes were never designed for the volume of people who use them. They were laid down centuries ago, following the old paths of a much smaller town. But now they carry something enormous. Money, yes, but also ambition, a kind of collective forward lean. The smell of coffee drifts from a cart on the corner. Strong and a little bitter, the vendor hands a cup to a man in a dark suit, without either of them saying a word. They have done this before. They will do it again tomorrow. There is comfort in that small, repeated thing. The financial markets have been growing through this decade in ways that feel almost hard to believe. Trading volumes on the New York Stock Exchange are climbing year after year. New financial instruments are being created. New ways of moving money around the world. The people who work in these buildings are working long hours, and the energy they give off is intense and a little electric. You can feel it even from the outside, a kind of hum. The buildings reflect all of this. Architecture in this decade has a confidence to it. Postmodern touches are appearing. A little ornamentation here, a colored cornice there, a nod to older styles worked into something very new. The city is not just building upward. It is building with a certain pride. a certain look-at-you's quality that feels earned after the difficult years before. You find a bench near a small plaza and sit for a moment. The morning light is shifting now, moving from gold to something cooler and clearer. Pigeons move across the stone in their unhurried way, unbothered by the suits and briefcases flowing past them. A woman reads a folded newspaper, her coffee balanced on her knee. The headline is about markets. It usually is, down here. You close your eyes for just a moment and listen. The sound of the city at this hour is layered, heels on pavement. A distant horn, the low rumble of something underground. And underneath all of it, that steady pulse, not so different from the boombox beat that drifted through a window the night before, somewhere uptown. Different music. Same city. Same restless, searching energy. New York in the 1980s is a city of contrasts that somehow hold together. Wealth building in the south, while other neighborhoods are still struggling. Glass towers rising while older buildings crumble. Optimism and difficulty, side by side, block by block. But here, in this early morning light, the contrasts feel softer. The skyline holds all of it, the old and the new, the difficult past and the uncertain future, the towers that almost weren't built and the ones that are still going up. You breathe in the cool air. There is a faint smell of the river, just a trace of it, carried on the breeze from somewhere you cannot quite see. The city is always becoming something. It never quite arrives. And maybe that is the thing that keeps it so alive. You let that thought settle quietly, like the morning light settling over the stone. There is a smell in the air tonight. Something faint and specific. A little like warm plastic. A little like new carpet. You notice it drifting down from the upper floors of the buildings around you, where the windows glow a pale, bluish white, even at this late hour. It is the smell of offices that never quite close, of machines that hum all night long. The financial district has gone quiet below, but up there, something is still very much awake. This is the early 1990s, and the city is changing in a way that is hard to see all at once. It is not the kind of change you can point to easily. There is no single building going up, no grand ceremony, no ribbon to cut. It is quieter than that. It is happening in small rooms, on small screens, through thin telephone wires that carry more and more information with every passing month. You walk slowly along the pavement. The air is cool against your arms. A taxi rolls past, its orange light on, looking for a fare. The streets smell faintly of rain from earlier, that clean, mineral smell of wet concrete beginning to dry. Somewhere above you, a window is open just a little. You can hear the soft, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard. Someone is working. Someone is always working now. The city has always had its industries. Shipping once, then manufacturing, then finance. But now there is something new threading itself through all of it. Something called the internet. Though most people in the city still say the word carefully, as if they are not quite sure how to hold it yet. A few years ago, it was mostly universities and research labs. Government computers talking to each other across long distances. But now it is moving into offices, into homes, into the small startup companies that are beginning to appear in the older warehouse buildings near the waterfront, where the rent is still low, and the rooms are large, and the walls are bare brick. You pass one of those buildings now. The ground floor is dark, but the second floor has light in every window. Through the glass you can see long tables covered in computers, young people sitting close together, leaning toward their screens. There is a kind of energy in there that you can almost feel from the street, a buzzing, forward-leaning feeling, like everyone inside is on the edge of something, and they know it. and they cannot quite sleep because of it. The city feels that way too in these years. Like it is leaning forward. You stop for a moment near a corner. There is a small cafe still open, its door propped wide. The smell of coffee drifts out to you, dark and roasted and warm. Inside, two people are talking over a laptop, pointing at the screen, nodding quickly. The barista wipes down the counter slowly, not really listening, just used to these conversations by now. Everyone is talking about what is coming, about what the network might become, about companies that do not make anything you can hold in your hands, but that are somehow worth more money every week, about the possibility that the whole world might one day be connected, city to city, person to person, through something invisible and fast and always on. It sounds almost like a dream when you hear it described, and maybe it is, a little, but it is also very real. The cables are already being laid, the servers are already running, the small companies are already growing, faster than anyone expected. You pull your jacket a little closer. The night air has a slight chill to it now. Your footsteps echo softly on the pavement as you walk on. The city around you looks the same as it always has in many ways. The same old stone buildings, the same streetlights, the same smell of the river somewhere not far off, but something is different. You can feel it in the pace of things, in the way people move, in the lights that stay on all night in the upper floors, in the keyboards clicking in the dark. The millennium is still a few years away, but already the city is counting toward it. Not with dread exactly, more with a kind of breathless anticipation, as if everyone senses that when that number finally turns, something will have already shifted. Something already has. You look up at one lit window, high above the street. A silhouette moves past it slowly. Someone stretching, maybe. Someone pausing to look out at the city below. You wonder what they can see from up there. The keys beneath your fingers feel different now. Smoother than anything that came before. The old typewriter keys had weight to them, a little resistance, a little pushback. But these keys give so easily. They almost disappear under your touch. You press one, and something happens somewhere far away, on a screen, in a server, in a building you will never visit. It is a strange kind of power, quiet and immediate and a little hard to believe. Sydney in the 1990s is learning what that power means. The decade begins with a recession actually. The early years are tight. Shops close on streets that were busy not long before. People talk about belt tightening, about waiting it out. But there is something underneath all of that. A current, a hum, a sense that something is building. You can feel it the way you feel a change in the weather before the clouds arrive. The air has a particular quality. Charged. Expectant. By the mid-90s, the mood shifts. The economy finds its footing again. And then something else finds its footing too. The internet arrives in Australian homes, slowly at first, then all at once. The dial-up tone becomes one of the sounds of the decade, that scratching, warbling, negotiating sound. Like two machines trying to shake hands across a great distance. You sit and wait while it connects. You watch the little lights blink. And then you are in. Somewhere new. Somewhere that has no streets, and no weather, and no smell at all. But Sydney itself still has all of those things. The harbour is still there, wide and silver in the morning. The ferries still cross it, leaving small white trails that fade before you finish watching. The smell of salt and diesel and coffee from the kiosk near the wharf. You stand on the deck of a ferry in 1997, and the wind is cold against your cheek, and the city rises behind you, and it looks, for a moment, like something from a dream you almost remember. The opera house sails, the bridge arches. These things have not changed, but everything around them is in motion. New restaurants open in Surrey Hills, in Newtown, in Darlinghurst. The food is different now, more of the world on the plate. Vietnamese, Thai, Lebanese, Japanese. Sydney has always been a city of arrivals, and the arrivals keep coming, and the kitchens keep changing. You eat a bowl of pho on a winter evening, and the steam rises into your face, and the broth is deep and warm, and the city outside the window is dark and wet and glittering. The 2000 Olympics are coming. Everyone knows it. The city is preparing itself quietly and then loudly. Construction cranes appear on the skyline. Roads are widened. A whole new precinct rises at Homish Bay, out where the industrial land used to sit. You drive past it one afternoon, and the scale of it surprises you. All those buildings going up so quickly, all that effort aimed at a single moment, and underneath the Olympics, underneath the internet, underneath all the noise of the decade, there is the question that everyone is carrying. The millennium question, the year 2000. What will happen when the clocks roll over? The computers, people say, might not know what to do. They were built for a world that ended in 1999. The nines were supposed to go on forever. You hear this talked about in offices, in kitchens, in pubs. Some people are worried. Some people are not. Most people are somewhere in between, curious, a little amused, a little unsure. You stock an extra torch in the cupboard. You fill a few bottles with water. You do not really think anything will go wrong, but you do it anyway, because the century is ending. That is real. Whatever else is uncertain. 100 years of this city's particular story. The trams and the wars and the harbour bridge, and the long, slow opening up to the world. All of it gathering into one final night. December 31, 1999. You stand somewhere with a view of the harbour. The air is warm. Summer in Sydney. The smell of sunscreen and grass, and something sweet from someone's drink nearby. Voices around you, low and excited. The water below catches the last of the light. You are waiting for something. You are not entirely sure what. The century breathes in and holds. The champagne is still on your tongue. Dry and a little sweet, with that faint fizz that lingers even after you swallow. The new millennium had arrived with so much brightness, so much hope sitting right there in the glass. And for a while, the city held on to that feeling. New York in those early years of the new century still moved with a kind of confidence. The streets were full. The restaurants were loud in the best way. The towers of Lower Manhattan caught the morning light and threw it back at you, gold and silver, like they always had. You might have walked past them 100 times without really looking up. Most people did. The World Trade Center was just part of the city's breathing, part of its ordinary rhythm. Office workers carried coffee through the plaza below. Pigeons gathered near the fountain. Delivery trucks idled on the side streets. The smell of exhaust and warm pretzels, and that particular underground dampness that rises from every subway grate in the city. It was a Tuesday morning in September. The air was unusually clear. The kind of September morning that feels like a gift after a long summer, cool and dry, with the sky so blue it almost looked painted. You could smell autumn coming, just barely. That first faint edge of it, and then everything changed. At 8:46 in the morning, the first plane struck the North Tower. 17 minutes later, the second hit the South Tower. By 10 o'clock, both towers had fallen. Nearly 3,000 people died that day. In the towers, on the plains, in the streets below. The city went very quiet in a way it almost never does. If you were in New York that morning, you remember the silence. Not total silence. There were sirens. There were voices. There was the low roar of things you couldn't quite understand. But underneath all of that, a hush, a held breath that the whole city seemed to take at once. The smell of smoke reached neighborhoods far from lower Manhattan. It was thick and strange, and it stayed in the air for days. Weeks, some people said. A smell unlike anything the city had known before. People walked uptown in long, quiet streams. Some still in their work clothes. Some carrying their shoes. Strangers walked beside each other without speaking, just moving, just needing to move. The bridges and tunnels closed. The subways stopped. The airports went silent. For a few hours, the loudest city in the world made almost no sound at all. Handwritten missing persons flyers appeared almost immediately, on lampposts, on mailboxes, on the walls of hospitals. Photographs of faces, names written in careful letters, someone's husband, someone's daughter, someone's friend who had just started a new job on the 94th floor. You could not walk past those flyers without stopping. Candles appeared in windows and on stoops. Flowers gathered at firehouses. Crowds stood outside in the evenings, not quite sure what to do with themselves, just needing to be near other people, needing to feel the warmth of someone standing close. The city grieved in public. That was something New York had always known how to do, to hold its pain out in the open, on the street, where everyone could see it and share it. In the weeks that followed, the smoke continued to rise from the site in lower Manhattan that people were already calling Ground Zero. Rescue workers and volunteers moved through the debris. The smell of it was everywhere downtown. It settled into clothing, into hair, into the walls of nearby buildings. The city kept going. Because that is what cities do. Because there were children to feed and trains to run, and a million small ordinary things that couldn't wait. But it kept going differently now, more carefully, with a new awareness of how quickly something permanent can become a memory. The skyline had changed. You could feel its absence before you could fully see it. A kind of openness in the downtown sky that felt wrong, like a tooth pulled from a familiar smile. People would stand at the end of streets in Brooklyn or New Jersey or Queens, looking south, looking for something that wasn't there anymore. And in that looking, in that quiet searching of the sky, there was something very human, something the city had always carried. This need to look, to remember, to understand what had been lost. The blue September sky held its silence, and somewhere in the stillness, the city began, very slowly, to breathe again. The sound comes back slowly. That is how it always is after something enormous. The world goes quiet first, and then, piece by piece, the sounds return. You hear a siren somewhere far away. Then voices, low and careful. The kind of voices people use when they are not sure what to say, but they know they need to say something. And underneath all of it, the city itself still breathing, still humming. The distant rumble of a subway train somewhere deep below the street. The soft creak of a building settling in the autumn air. New York does not go silent for long. In the days after September 2001, the city moves through something it has never quite moved through before. There is grief, yes, deep and wide and hard to hold. But there is also something else. Something quieter and more stubborn. You see it in the way people leave flowers at firehouses. in the way strangers hold doors open a little longer than usual, in the way someone on the subway catches your eye and gives you a small nod, as if to say, "I see you. We are still here." The smell of the city in those weeks is something people do not easily forget. Smoke and dust, and something metallic that clings to the back of the throat, but also candles. Hundreds and hundreds of candles, lit at makeshift memorials along fences and sidewalk, wax and warm flame, and the faint sweetness of dried flowers left in the open air. Recovery is not a single moment. It is many small moments, laid one on top of another. In the years that follow, the city begins the long, careful work of deciding what comes next. What do you build in a place that holds so much loss? How do you honor what was there, and still make room for what comes after? These are not easy questions. People disagree, loudly sometimes, quietly other times. But the conversations keep happening, and that itself is a kind of resilience. By 2004, the design for a memorial is chosen. 2 great reflecting pools set into the footprints of the original towers, water falling endlessly downward into a quiet center that you cannot quite see from the edge. The names of those lost carved into the bronze surrounding the pools. You can run your fingers along those letters someday and feel the weight of each one. The construction of the new World Trade Center site is slow and complicated. There are years of planning, of debate, of setbacks. The ground itself is difficult, saturated with memory, with history, with the weight of what happened. Workers dig deep into the Manhattan bedrock, the same ancient schist that has held this island up for centuries. You can almost feel the solidity of it beneath your feet. That old, patient stone. Around the site, the city keeps moving. Lower Manhattan changes in these years. Old office buildings become apartments. New restaurants open. People move into neighborhoods that were once only places you passed through on your way somewhere else. The streets around Fulton and Cortlandt and Liberty begin to feel lived in again. Warmer, more human. And the memorials grow quieter too, in a way. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but absorbed into the everyday life of the city. The flowers are replaced by something more permanent. The candles burn down and are not always replaced. But the names remain. The memory remains, held gently in the fabric of the place. You think about what it means to rebuild. It is not the same as erasing. It is not pretending something did not happen. It is more like carrying it forward, finding a way to hold the loss, and still put one foot in front of the other. Still take the subway. Still buy a coffee. Still look up at the sky between the buildings and feel something close to wonder. By the end of the decade, a new skyline is slowly beginning to take shape. You can see the steel rising if you look downtown on a clear day. It is not finished yet. It will take more years still. But it is there, reaching upward, the way this city has always reached. The sound of construction, the low percussion of it, the cranes and the machinery, and the voices of workers calling to each other across the site, becomes its own kind of music. Not beautiful exactly, but purposeful, steady. And the city breathes with it, in and out, slow and even, the way it always has. The light changes slowly over the city in the morning. You notice it first in the glass, all that glass, catching the early sun and throwing it back in long, pale ribbons across the street below. The towers downtown have multiplied. They rise now in clusters, smooth-sided and silver, and from a distance they look almost like a second skyline sitting on top of the first one. The old brick and the new glass, both there at once. both catching the light in their own way. You walk through the streets, and the city feels faster than it did even 10 years ago. Not louder exactly, just faster. People move with their eyes slightly down toward the small bright screens in their hands. The phones have changed everything about how the city moves, how it breathes. You can order a car without stepping to the curb. You can find a room for the night without knowing anyone in the neighborhood. The old ways of navigating a city, the asking, the wandering, the small conversations at corners, those are still here, but quieter now, layered underneath something new. The tech industry has settled deep into the city's bones. You can feel it in the coffee shops, where people sit for hours with laptops open, the soft tap of keys mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine. You can smell the coffee, dark and a little bitter, and underneath it something else, something harder to name. Ambition, maybe, or urgency. The city is attracting people from everywhere. People with ideas and code and venture capital, and very little sleep. They are young, a lot of them, and they are changing the shape of things. But the shape of things is not changing evenly. You notice that too. You walk a few blocks in one direction, and the storefronts are bright and new. The sidewalks clean, the restaurants full of small plates and natural wine. You walk a few blocks in another direction, and the picture shifts. Older buildings with peeling paint. A laundromat that has been there for 40 years. A woman sitting on her front steps in the afternoon warmth, watching the street with an expression that is patient and a little tired. She has watched this neighborhood change before. She is watching it change again. Rents are climbing. They have been climbing for years now, but in this decade, they climb faster. People who have lived in the same apartment for a generation find letters slipped under their doors. The numbers in those letters are impossible. Some people leave. Some fight. And some of the fighting becomes something larger, because this is also the decade of the movement. You feel it gathering in the air of the city long before it becomes visible. There is a tension that lives in the gap between the gleaming new towers and the neighborhoods that are being quietly hollowed out, between the city that is celebrated in magazine profiles and the city that a lot of people are actually living in. That tension has always been here, in some form, but in this decade it finds its voice. You hear it on a Saturday afternoon, when a crowd fills one of the wide downtown boulevards. The sound is not angry exactly, or not only angry. There is something else in it. Something that sounds like insistence, like people saying, quietly and then not so quietly, that they are here, that they have always been here. That being here matters. The city has seen protests before, of course. It has seen marches and sit-ins and vigils going back a very long time. But something about this decade feels different. The movements are connected now in ways they never were before. A phone pressed to a window, a video shared in seconds to 1 million screens, the local and the national and the global all folded together, all breathing the same breath. And through all of it, the tech campuses and the displacement, the protests and the policy debates, the cranes on the skyline and the tents beneath the overpasses, the city keeps moving. It always keeps moving. That is one of the things you have come to understand about it, walking these streets across so many years. The city holds contradictions the way a river holds currents. They run alongside each other, sometimes smooth, sometimes turbulent, and the river keeps going. You stop at a corner as the afternoon light softens. A child on a bicycle wobbles past, laughing at something only she can see. A bus sighs to a stop. Somewhere nearby, someone is cooking onions in a pan, and the warm, golden smell drifts out through an open window. The city breathes, and you breathe with it. The air smells different now. You notice it before anything else. Cleaner, somehow. A little emptier. The usual mix of exhaust and coffee and warm bread from the bakery on the corner. It's still there, but softer. Diluted. As if the city has taken a long breath in and is holding it very, very gently. It is early 2020, and something has changed. Not all at once. It never happens all at once. It comes in quietly, the way a fog comes in. You look up, and suddenly the familiar shapes of things are a little harder to see. The bike lights you watched weaving through the twilight, that new rhythm of the streets, it continues. But now there are fewer cars alongside them, fewer footsteps on the pavement. The city that never quite went silent is learning, for the first time in a long time, what silence actually feels like. You step outside one morning, and the stillness is almost physical. You can feel it on your skin, like the cool of a room where no one has been for a while. The streets of the city, whatever city this is, your city, the one you know, are not empty, but they are quieter than you have ever known them. Shops pull down their shutters. Restaurants go dark behind their windows. The little cafe where you used to sit with a warm cup between your palms, watching the street, watching strangers, it is closed now. A handwritten sign on the door. Back soon, it says. Everyone hopes that is true. This is the pandemic. COVID-19, a word that will sit in the memory of every city on Earth for years to come. And cities, as they always have, begin to adapt. The parks stay open. People learn to treasure that. You see them there in the mornings, walking slowly, keeping their distance, breathing the open air like it is something precious. Because it is. It always was. It just took this to remind everyone. Balconies become living rooms. Windows become stages. In some cities, people sing to each other across the narrow space between buildings. In others, they bang pots and pans at a certain hour each evening, a strange, clattering, tender kind of applause for the people working in hospitals and care homes and grocery stores, the ones who keep showing up. The smell of hand sanitizer becomes familiar. Sharp and clean and slightly chemical. You find a small bottle of it in your pocket, and you don't remember putting it there. That is what this time does. It fills your pockets with new habits without you quite noticing. Inside, life reorganizes itself. Kitchen tables become desks. Living rooms become classrooms. The sound of video calls drifts through apartment walls. Voices talking to small rectangles of light, trying to stay close to the people they love. It is strange, and it is tender, and it is, in its way, very human. The city misses itself. You can feel that too. There is something wistful in the empty streets, in the darkened restaurant windows, in the playgrounds with their swings tied up. Cities are made for gathering. They are built around the idea that people want to be near each other. And so a city without its people feels like a sentence waiting for its ending. But people are resourceful. They always have been. Restaurants learn to cook for doorsteps. Theaters learn to perform for cameras. Teachers learn to reach through screens. Musicians play live from their living rooms, and thousands of people listen from their own living rooms, all of them alone together in a way that is both sad and quietly beautiful. The bike lanes fill up. That rhythm you noticed, it grows. People who never cycled before discover the pleasure of moving through a quieter city under their own power. The air is cleaner. The streets feel different at that pace. Slower, more human-sized. And slowly, the city begins to find its way through. Not quickly. Not without loss. There is real grief in this time, in the empty chairs, in the funerals that cannot be held the way they should be, in the distance kept between people who want nothing more than to be close. That grief is real, and it deserves to be named. But cities have always carried their grief alongside their living. That is what cities do. And so the lights come back on, one by one, slowly at first. A cafe reopening, a market stall setting out its fruit, the smell of coffee drifting out into the morning air again, warm and familiar, and very, very welcome. The city exhales, and you exhale with it. There is something about the feeling of a city waking up slowly, not all at once, not with a sudden jolt, but the way a morning comes in gently. First a little warmth, then a little light, then the soft pressure of the world returning to itself. You can feel it in small ways. The worn wooden handle of a cafe door, smooth from years of hands pushing through. The slight give of a fresh coat of paint on a shopfront wall, still a little tacky under your fingertips. The cool metal of a new bicycle rack, bolted into a pavement that has seen so much. These are quiet textures, but they mean something. They are the textures of a city choosing to keep going. The rain from the night before has left the streets clean and bright. Puddles catch the early light and hold it for a moment before the day moves on. The air still carries that freshness, cool and a little sharp, like the city has taken a long breath and is only now letting it out slowly. This is where we find ourselves now, in the years just after the long stillness. The pandemic years left a mark on every city in the world, and this one was no different. Shops that had stood for decades closed quietly. Streets that had always hummed with noise went silent. People stayed inside and listened to the sound of their own homes in a way they never had before. But cities are patient things. They have seen difficult seasons before. They know how to wait. And so the waiting ended. Not all at once. Slowly, tentatively, like stepping onto ice and testing it before you trust your full weight. A cafe reopened with new chairs outside. A market stall came back with a different face behind it. A community garden appeared on a corner that had been empty for 2 years. Raised beds full of dark soil, a hand-painted sign, a few green shoots just beginning to show. You walk through streets like this, and you notice the sounds have changed. There is more of them now. The low murmur of conversation spilling out of open windows. The scrape of a delivery bike turning a corner. Somewhere nearby, the sound of construction. Not the kind that tears things down, but the kind that builds something new. A steady rhythm of hammering, then a pause, then hammering again. It is almost musical if you let it be. The smell of coffee is back, strong and dark and warm, drifting out from a small place with fogged-up windows and a chalkboard menu. You pass it and feel the warmth on your face for just a moment before the cool air takes over again. There are new things here now. You notice them if you look. A mural that wasn't there before. Large and colorful, painted on the side of a building that used to be blank. It shows figures in motion, all moving in the same direction, faces turned slightly upward. Someone made this. Someone climbed a scaffold in the early morning cold and made something beautiful on a wall that most people walk past without thinking. There are new businesses too, the kind that come from people who had time to think during the quiet years. Small studios, independent bookshops, a place that sells handmade things and smells of beeswax and cedar. These are fragile things, new and a little uncertain, but they are here, and there are the older things still standing. The buildings that have been here for 100 years or more, their stone facades worn smooth and grey, their windows watching the street below with a kind of patience that only old things have. They have seen the city change before. They are not surprised. They simply continue. You sit for a moment on a low wall near a small square. The stone is cold through your clothes, but not unpleasantly so. A pigeon lands nearby and tilts its head at you. Children are running somewhere just out of sight, their voices high and light, and full of no particular worry. The city is not the same as it was. It never is. Every era leaves something behind and takes something with it. But there is something here now that feels like forward movement. Not rushing, not urgent. Just the quiet, steady feeling of a place that has decided to keep going. A bus passes. A dog trots by on a lead. Someone laughs inside a building across the square. The city breathes, and somewhere in that breath, there is something that feels very much like hope. Not yet fully formed, not yet certain, but present. There is something in the air here that you can almost taste. A kind of sweetness, faint and warm, like the first sip of coffee from a paper cup on a cool morning. You are standing near a food cart on the corner, and the smell of roasting nuts drifts past you, mixing with something savory from the kitchen window above. The city feeds you before you even ask. It always has. You step back from the subway car, your fingertips still carrying the faint coolness of the painted metal. The colors there are bright and deliberate. Someone spent time on that. Someone wanted you to see it. And you did. This is how the city speaks in 2026, not in grand announcements. In small, careful gestures. A mural. A garden growing up through a chain-link fence. A bench placed just right, so the afternoon light falls across it like a blanket. You walk for a while. The streets are busy, but not frantic. There is a rhythm to the movement around you. People finding their way, pausing, continuing. A child pulls at a parent's hand and points at something you cannot quite see. A man sits outside a repair shop, turning a small radio in his hands. Not fixing it yet, just thinking. An older woman waters the plants on her windowsill, leaning out just slightly, watching the street below with quiet satisfaction. The city has been through so much to arrive at this particular morning. You think about all of it. The earliest settlers who stood on this ground and felt something possible here. The long centuries of building and tearing down and building again. The fires and the floods and the slow, difficult work of recovery. The voices that were silenced and the voices that eventually, stubbornly, found their way through. The neighborhoods that changed and the ones that held on. The arguments and the agreements. The grief and the celebration. All of that is still here. You can feel it in the weight of the pavement under your feet, in the way the old buildings lean slightly toward each other, like people who have known each other for a very long time. A young woman sits on the steps of a library reading. The stone steps are worn smooth in the middle, from decades of people sitting exactly where she is sitting now. She does not know that, or maybe she does. Either way, she is part of it. That is the thing about a living city. It does not ask you to remember. It simply carries you forward inside its memory. You become part of the story without trying. Every footstep adds to the count. Every conversation echoes somewhere. You find a quiet spot near the water. There is always water somewhere in a city like this. You sit down and let the sound of it settle around you. A soft lapping. A distant horn from somewhere out on the river. The cry of a bird passing overhead. The taste of that morning coffee is still with you, warm at the back of your throat. In 2026, this city is not finished. It is never finished. There are still arguments happening in meeting rooms right now about what to build and what to keep. There are still people arriving for the first time, stepping off trains or buses or planes, looking up at the skyline, and feeling that particular mixture of hope and uncertainty. There are still children learning the streets, memorizing the shortcuts, claiming their own small corners of it. And there are still people leaving, carrying the city with them in their voices and their habits, and the way they describe home to someone who has never been. The city holds all of this without effort. It has always been large enough for contradiction, warm enough for strangers, old enough to know that everything changes and almost nothing is ever truly lost. You breathe in slowly. The air smells like the river and like bread and like the particular dusty warmth of a city in the middle of an ordinary day. This is the legacy, not the monuments, though they are beautiful. Not the famous names carved into stone, though they matter. The legacy is this, the living of it, the daily, quiet, unremarkable continuation of a place that has decided, again and again across centuries, to keep going. You sit a little longer. There is no hurry. The city breathes around you, patient and present, the way it has always been. And somewhere nearby, someone is adding something new to it. Something small, something that will still be here, long after today becomes history.